In most horror movies, the goal is simple. Don't die, run faster than the killer, don't trip over nothing, survive to the credits. But there's a different kind of horror out there. The kind where dying would be the happy ending, where death is the thing that you're begging for and not getting. Well, these are a bunch of different movies that figured out exactly what makes life worth living, and then they removed it piece by piece while keeping you awake to feel it. These are fates so much worse than death. Let's start with Funny Games, a movie where the director actively hates you for watching it. The Farber family goes on vacation to their lake house, and two polite young men in white gloves show up asking to borrow some eggs. They keep breaking them, they overstay their welcome in that specific way where you can't kick them out without seeming rude. And that's the whole trick. They're using your manners as a weapon. By the time George finally tries to throw them out, it's too late. One of them breaks his leg with a golf club, just shatters it. From that moment on, George is a vegetable. He can't stand, he can't fight, he can't do anything except watch everything that happens to his family while lying on the floor like a broken kitchen appliance. His son, Georgie, gets killed off screen. The camera just sits in the empty living room while you hear a gunshot somewhere else in the house. The director won't even show you the death, he makes you imagine it instead, which is worse. But here's where it really breaks something inside you. And the mother manages to grab a shotgun and shoot one of the killers. For 1 second you think she did it, she fought back. The final girl wins. But then the other killer picks up a TV remote and rewinds the movie that you are watching. Like literally. The footage reverses on screen and the scene plays out again with Anne nowhere near the gun. The director made this film to tell you one thing. Fighting back isn't allowed here. The rules of horror don't apply. The director himself is working against you, but at least the Farbers die at the end. It's awful, but it's over. Some horror movies don't give you that mercy. Some keep you alive on purpose because you're worth more breathing. That's exactly what happens in Fresh. Noah meets a charming guy at a grocery store. His name is Steve. He's funny, he's sexy, he's confident, he actually listens when she talks. It's everything the dating apps couldn't deliver. He then asks her on a romantic weekend getaway. She says yes, why wouldn't she? This is the guy that she's been dreaming of. Well, then she wakes up chained to the floor of his basement. The thing about Steve is that he's not a serial killer. Serial killers kill people. Steve is a butcher. He surgically removes pieces of women while keeping them alive because living bodies give him fresh product over time. He is a surgeon by training, so he knows exactly how much he can take before the merchandise stops working. When Noah tries to escape, he literally cuts off her ass. He cuts it off, takes the whole thing for punishment and just to sell. The worst part isn't that Steve is crazy, it's that he's not. Besides what he does for a living, he seems like a very normal, if not like charming guy. He is running a business here. He has wealthy clients paying 6 figures for what he's selling. There is a market for this. There is a whole economy built around eating women who are still breathing somewhere in a basement. And Steve is just the supplier. Some rich guy is sitting at a dinner party right now, eating a woman medium rare with a wine pairing, and Steve made that happen. Noah isn't dying because death would end the money. She is being harvested, piece by piece, fully awake, feeling everything, because Fresh product sells better than frozen. Fresh treats its victims like a valuable inventory. Steve keeps them breathing because they're profitable. At least there's a logic to it. It's sick, disgusting logic, but it is logic. At least you matter to someone, even if that someone is carving you up for rich people's dinner parties. Well, the family in Frontiers, well, they don't give you that much, because they don't see you as a product. They see you as an animal. A group of French Arab kids are running from the cops after a robbery gone wrong. Riots are tearing through Paris, everything's chaos, and they need to get out of the country fast. So they find a remote inn near the German border. It's a quiet place. It's isolated with 2 pretty women running it. It seems like a good spot to lay low for the night. It's not. The owners are neo-Nazis. And no, I don't mean like internet edgelord neo-Nazis like that one neckbeard cousin you have that shows up at family gatherings and then says all of the things wrong that they could say in that one evening. Like, no, Gerald, I don't want to hear about what your opinions are on women. Trust me. You haven't talked any before. I don't think you got a good opinion. But I mean like actual breeding program, master race neo-Nazis running a whole operation out of their property. They grab people they consider racially inferior, torture them, and sometimes keep the useful ones around for making babies. When they capture 2 of the main characters, they don't throw them in a cell or a basement. They throw them in a pig pen with actual pigs because that's the point. You are not a person here. You are livestock. There's this dinner scene that twists the knife in a specific way. Yasmin, one of the captives, gets brought before the family patriarch. She's waiting for the death sentence, but that's not what happens. She's pregnant. She's going to be given to one of the sons as a wife because her body doesn't belong to her anymore. It belongs to their breeding program now. That is the difference between Fresh and this. Steve saw his victims as valuable products worth keeping alive, but these people see their victims as livestock. Not worth selling, not worth keeping comfortable, just bodies with functions to exploit until they stop working. Death would be a happy ending here. What Frontiers offers instead is a lifetime of forced breeding under a Nazi ownership. Your only exit is fighting through an entire family of psychopaths with your bare hands, which Yasmin actually does, but that's a different story. Let's now go to Bone Tomahawk because it goes somewhere even darker, to a place where the people holding you aren't even human enough to have any sort of ideology around killing at all. This is a Western, a slow, dusty, character-driven Western where you spend 2 full hours getting to know a handful of men crossing the desert to rescue a kidnapped woman. Kurt Russell plays the sheriff. Patrick Wilson plays a husband with a broken leg who refuses to stay behind. Richard Jenkins plays the old deputy who talks too much and means well. By the time anything truly bad happens, you genuinely care about these people. You want them to make it home. And then you meet the troglodytes. They're a tribe living in caves, but they're not indigenous people. The movie goes out of its way to make that very clear, because the Native American characters in this film refuse to even call them human. There's something that split off from humanity a long time ago and went somewhere else entirely. Anyways, fast forward a little bit, they get captured, and Deputy Nick gets pulled out of a cage. What happens next is one of the most disturbing scenes ever put on film. He is scalped alive while he is screaming. His own scalp gets stuffed into his mouth and nailed there with a wooden stake through the back of his skull. Then he's flipped upside down and split open from the groin with a bone tomahawk. Ha! He said the name. He's literally pulled apart like a wishbone while the camera holds on every second of it. But Nick is the lucky one. Nick gets to die. The women in those caves don't get that mercy. They've been blinded with wooden pegs, hammered through their eyes, with all of their limbs hacked off, kept alive as permanent breeding stock. They are conscious and immobile. There's no way out. There's no way to end it. They are just chicken nugget bodies the tribe uses for just to have more babies. Death is Nick's reward. The women get an existence stripped of everything that makes it bearable, and no way to make it stop. They can't see, they can't move, they can't even end their own lives. They just wait in the dark until their bodies finally quit on their own. Pretty messed up if you ask me. But our next movie, Inside, takes the horror somewhere even more primal. What happens when the thing hunting you is hunting something that you would die to protect? Sarah is 9 months pregnant. She is ready to pop. She's a fruit gusher. It is Christmas Eve. Her husband died of a car crash 4 months ago, and this baby is the only piece of him left in this world. She's alone in her house, hours from delivery, just trying to make it through one more night before she goes to the hospital in the morning. And then someone knocks on the door. A woman outside asks to use the phone, except she knows Sarah's name, knows the husband is dead, and has been following Sarah for months. When Sarah refuses to let her in, she doesn't leave. She finds another way inside, and she's not there to kill Sarah. She's there for the baby. What follows is 90 minutes of the most brutal home invasion ever put on film. Every single person who tries to help Sarah dies. Her boss shows up and gets killed. The cops show up, same thing. Her own mother shows up and Sarah kills her by accident in the dark because she thinks it's the intruder. By the end of the movie, Sarah is bleeding out on the floor while this woman cuts her open with a pair of scissors and walks out holding the child Sarah spent 9 months protecting and growing. Here's what makes it worse though. La Femme, the villain, was pregnant too. She was in the other car during the crash that killed Sarah's husband. She lost her baby that night. This is not just random violence. It is grief that turned into something monstrous. 2 mothers, 1 accident, 1 living baby left between them, and a botched home C-section. Ugh. Sarah protected this child through 4 months of mourning her husband and a night of absolute hell. And in her final moments, she watches someone else take her baby. The thing she would have died for gets lifted out of her dying body, and there is nothing she can do except watch it happen. If there is an afterlife, she will go to that afterlife knowing that she lost her baby right before she died. She wasn't even dead to not know. She knows exactly what happened. Inside doesn't just take Sarah's body from her, it takes her purpose. Everything she was living for walks out the door in someone else's arm. But our next movie, Evil Dead Rise, asks a different question. What happens when it's not one mother who becomes a monster, but your whole family? Ellie is a single mom in a condemned Los Angeles apartment building, raising 3 kids in a place that's about to be demolished. An earthquake cracks open the basement, and her teenage son Danny finds something down there. Vinyl records from 1923 in a book bound in what looks like an awful lot like human skin. Or like a nutsack. It kind of looks like a nutsack too, but if I'm being honest, bound old human skin kind of looks like a nutsack. You ever like seen someone that's like 105 years old? They all kind of look like a nutsack. Sorry for that visual in your head. Like, think about the hair. Never mind. I won't go there with you guys. Trust me, it's okay. You get the idea. Anyways, dumbass Danny plays the records, and naturally, the record contains a priest reading an incantation from the Book of the Dead, because of course it does. Why else? Why wouldn't it? So, Mom then gets possessed in the elevator, but she doesn't just become a monster. She becomes a monster wearing Mom's face, using Mom's voice, knowing everything Mom knows about her children. She knows their fears, their secrets, exactly what to say to make them hesitate instead of run. The demon didn't pick a random victim. It picked the person these kids trust more than anyone alive and turned that trust into a weapon. Then Danny gets infected. Then his sister Bridget, and now Evil Dead Rise does something the franchise has never tried before. The 3 of them merge. They fuse together into this nightmare called the Marauder, a tangle of limbs and faces that shouldn't exist, made entirely of people the youngest daughter Cassie loves. Cassie is maybe 10 years old. Her whole body is telling her to run to her mother. That's the instinct, the one that's kept children alive since the beginning of the series. And that instinct is now a trap. The thing wearing Mom's face is counting on it. By the time her Aunt Beth shoves the Marauder into a wood chipper, Cassie has already lost everything. Not to a monster, but to her family becoming one. She walks out of that building carrying something no child should ever have to carry. Evil Dead Rise breaks one family by turning them into demons. But at least something supernatural did it though. A possession. An outside force taking over. But our next movie, The Sacrament, breaks 167 people without any demons at all. Just the belief and religion, and most of them helped make it happen. Eden Parish sounds like a paradise, a commune in the jungle far from America, full of people who finally found somewhere they fit in. Addicts who got clean, outcasts who found purpose, people the rest of the world had written off. When a documentary crew shows up to check on one member's sister, everyone seems happy. The leader they call Father is warm, charismatic, and talks about love like he actually means it. Then night comes, and everything falls apart. Notes start getting slipped to the camera crew, people begging for help getting out. Armed guards appear at the edge of the compound. Father's voice comes over the loudspeakers announcing that the time has come. And suddenly everyone is being marched towards a clearing where barrels of poisoned Kool-Aid are waiting. This is Jonestown, the real thing dressed up as fiction. 918 people died in 1978, and The Sacrament puts a camera right damn smack in the middle of it. Parents poison their children's first. A woman named Sarah kills her own daughter before the guards can get to them, an act that she believes is mercy. And Caroline, the whole reason the documentary crew came here, personally injects her brother Patrick with poison while he asks what she just gave him. He crossed the world to save her, and she watches him die with complete calm on her face because Father said it was time. Nobody was possessed, nobody was physically forced. They believed so hard and so long, they lost the ability to tell the difference between faith and murder. The community that saved them became the thing that killed them, and they thanked it while it happened. Let's now move on to Event Horizon, where they flip the attack inward, where your own guilt becomes the weapon. In 2040, humanity built a ship that could fold space, could punch a hole through reality and come out anywhere in the universe instantly. The Event Horizon was the future of everything. Then it vanished on its first voyage and didn't come back. 7 years later, it reappears near Neptune. It's broadcasting a distress signal that sounds like people screaming. So a rescue crew is sent on a mission and they board the ship. There's no survivors, blood on the walls, but no bodies. And then they find the video logs from the original crew's final hours. The footage they find is some of the most disturbing material ever filmed, and most of it got cut before release because test audiences couldn't handle it. What survived shows the captain holding his own eyeballs in his hands while chanting in Latin. The crew behind him ripping each other apart, doing things to each other that don't have names. They weren't attacked by aliens. They became something. The ship went somewhere, and whatever was there reached inside them and pulled out the worst version of every person on board. Now the rescue crew is stuck, and the ship starts working on them too. It doesn't kill you quickly. That would be way too easy. It crawls into your head and finds the thing you feel most guilty about, the person you failed, that wound that never closed, that weird browsing history you had last week. Then it puts that memory in front of your face until your mind breaks open. One crew member sees her dying son begging her not to leave. Another watches his friend burn alive and asks why he didn't save him. The dimension the ship punched through wasn't another point in space. It was hell. Pure chaos, pure evil, aware and hungry. And the ship brought a piece of it back inside itself. Our next movie, Color Out of Space, goes somewhere even worse, because at least the thing inside Event Horizon knows you're there. The color doesn't notice or care about you at all. A meteorite crashes in the front yard of a farmhouse. It glows a color that shouldn't exist. Not pink, not purple, not anything in nature, just wrong. The authorities come, poke at it, shrug, and leave. The Gardner family goes back to their lives. They keep drinking the water from the well. Then things start going sideways. Nathan, the father, starts having mood swings that feel like they belong to someone else. Teresa, the mother, zones out while chopping vegetables and cuts off 2 of her own fingers without noticing. The youngest son, Jack, starts spending hours staring into the well, whispering to something that he says is living down there. The family alpacas fuse into a screaming lump of, well, multiple alpacas that shouldn't be alive. And then the color hits Teresa and Jack at the same time. When the light fades, they've merged. The mother and son are physically fused into one body, still conscious, still aware, and both of them screaming. They know what's happened. They can feel each other inside what they've become. Nathan, barely himself by this point, picks up a shotgun and kills the thing that used to be his wife and child. As mercy, as horror, as the only option left. The worst part is this: the color didn't target them. The color doesn't target anything. It doesn't hate, it doesn't think, it doesn't know they exist. It was just passing through. And the Gardners happened to be standing in the way. When you're that small, indifference looks exactly like cruelty to the things caught in its path. Imagine you stepping on an anthill accidentally. You have no idea they are there. All the ants are probably thinking that you were some god destroying their home. This is exactly how the color views or doesn't view us. But even this ends. The family dies, the color moves on, and it's over. Now let's talk about another fate in this video. And this one never stops. This one goes on forever. We're going to talk about Drag Me to Hell. Christine Brown works at a bank. She's nice, she's hardworking, and her boss just told her she needs to prove that she can make tough calls if she wants a promotion. So when an elderly woman named Sylvia Ganoush comes in begging for a 3rd extension on her mortgage, Christine makes the tough call. She says, no, that is it. That's the whole crime. And personally, 3rd extension on a mortgage, like, let's be real here, Mrs. Ganoush. You need to pay your damn mortgage. 3 extensions is a lot. 1st or 2nd, I would maybe be on your team. But 3rd? Come on. Anyway, she says, no, that's it. That's the whole crime. It's one professional decision made under career pressure. And Christine is now cursed to be dragged bodily into hell in exactly 3 days. What follows is nonstop. A demon hovering over her bed, mud filling her mouth in a graveyard, the old woman's corpse attacking her at a funeral home. Christine does everything right. She fights, she visits psychics, she performs rituals, she digs up the grave and shoves the cursed button back into Sylvia Ganoush's dead mouth. She wins. She actually genuinely beats the curse. She then shows up at the train station where her boyfriend is waiting to propose. She's smiling. It's over. And then she looks down at the envelope in her hand. She grabbed the wrong one. The button is still with her. The ground splits open. Hands made of fire reach up from the crack, and Christine Brown falls screaming into hell. This is not movie hell, where she'll fight her way back in the sequel, but real hell, eternal hell, the kind where the suffering doesn't end when the credits roll, doesn't end when you forget about the movie, doesn't end when the sun burns out and the universe goes cold. She burns past any number of years you can say out loud, forever. For every other fate in this video, the woman in the caves eventually die. The cult drinks the poison, the Gardners dissolve. Death is horrible, but death is a finish line. You cross it and you're done. But Christine doesn't get that. Christine gets eternity in a place built to make every second worse than the last. And there's no last second. There's no relief, no end. There's just more and more and more forever. Wallace Brighton is a podcaster, which already tells you his decision-making skills are questionable. I mean, what type of career is that? And in 2014, he flies to Canada to interview a guy he found on the internet who claims to have stories about a walrus. This man is not a marine biologist. He's just some really old dude with feelings about walruses, if you catch my drift. Wallace drives hours into the middle of nowhere, which is like Canada anywhere. It's horrible up here. I hate it up here. Literally, it's so damn cold. He literally just does it because content is content. The old man drugs his tea within the first 10 minutes, and Wallace wakes up with one leg already amputated because the interview is now a surgery. Over the next few days, this lunatic removes Wallace's other leg, cuts the bones down, and reshapes them into tusks, sews his arms to his sides so they work as flippers, cut out his tongue, and stitches him into a full bodysuit made out of human skin so he looks and moves like a walrus. Wallace the walrus. Who could have saw that coming? He is also awake for a lot of this, and the only sound he can make are whatever noises a broken walrus could make, which the film accurately portrays as deeply unsettling. Here's the part that makes it worse than death though. Wallace gets rescued, his friends find him, the cops show up, the bad guy dies, and Wallace survives. But there's no fixing what was done. His legs are gone, his arms don't work, his tongue is gone, his body is too destroyed to reconstruct into anything human. So they put him in an animal sanctuary, and he just lives there now as a walrus. His girlfriend visits and feeds him fish because she still loves him, which sounds sweet until you remember Wallace is a human man who is mentally intact and forced to exist permanently as a fish-eating floor creature in a zoo. You wouldn't last because the moment you realize that you're staying in that body, you would probably start trying to drown yourself in the shallow pool, and somebody would just pull you out and give you another fish for being a good little walrus. At least Wallace's nightmare happened kind of on accident. They were just trying to help him out after, making the best out of a worst case scenario. But the next case we're going to talk about was designed on purpose by a surgeon who sat down, planned the whole thing out, and still thought this was a good idea. And this movie traumatized me when I was 14 when I first heard about it, because of course you gotta watch this movie if you're 14. You're like, that sounds stupid and creepy and weird. Of course I'm gonna watch it. Two American tourists get a flat tire in Germany, which is already the setup to a problem you can see coming. And they knock on the door of the nearest house to ask for help. It's a retired surgeon answers, offers them water, drugs the water, and when they wake up, they're strapped to medical tables next to some guy who's also strapped to a table, which means that this is not the first time this doctor has done this. The surgeon explains his plan very calmly, very professionally. He's gonna create a human centipede by surgically connecting mouth to butt in a chain. Lindsay, one of the tourists, gets assigned to the middle position, which the surgeon specifies is the worst because you'll be attached on both ends. He cuts the ligaments in her knees then, so she can only crawl, and stitches her mouth to her friend's body and stitches the guy behind her to hers. And from that point on, Lindsay is physically connected to two other people in the most degrading way a doctor could think of, and the most nastiest thing ever. Because let's not even talk about the infection risk, because it alone would kill you in days. But that's not even the worst part. By the end of the movie, the person in front of Lindsay ends his own life, and the person behind her dies from blood poisoning, because let's just say they ain't getting the Arby's 2-for-1 deal. They're getting something else. But Lindsay is still alive. She is sewn between two dead bodies and can't move because she's stitched to the corpses. She can't scream because her mouth is connected to one of them. And the movie just ends pretty much they're sobbing in silence until she kind of rips out. The real part is like stuck between two dead people. Yeah, you probably wouldn't last because the moment you understood that you were in that position, your brain would just shut off. Some situations break people faster than bodies can fail, and being trapped as the middle segment of a dead centipede is one of them. What makes this movie even worse is that I've definitely watched this movie more than once on a first date before. We never got a second date. I wonder why. But even worse than that, I have to mention this out every single time I talk about this movie, is the infamous Chupacabra goth mommy incident of 1997. Pretty much I made a video talking about this movie one time, and one of the comments was a guy saying he wouldn't mind being the middle as long as a goth mommy was in front of him. Yeah, that video went viral too, and I pinned his comment out of shame. I hope your mom sees that, buddy. Now look at this, I'm just gonna invite everybody to comment the most deranged things possible. I know it. So those first two were about slow destruction over days, but some horror movies don't bother with slow. They just break your entire body in under 3 minutes and leave you alive to experience what happens after every bone snaps. Olga is a dancer at a prestigious academy in Berlin, and one day she decides she wants to quit because the vibes are off and she's getting a weird feeling about the teachers, which is the correct instinct because the teachers are witches. That's right, not bitches, but witches. She tries to leave during a rehearsal, walks into the studio to grab her stuff, and that's when the witches decide to make an example out of her using another dancer as a psychic remote control. One of the students starts rehearsing a routine in a different room, and every movement she makes gets transferred onto Olga's body, but wrong. When the dancer jumps, Olga's bones twist. When the dancer spins, Olga's spine bends backwards. Her ribs crack outward, her legs fold in directions they don't fold. Her jaw gets smashed into the mirror, and within 2 minutes, Olga goes from a healthy person to a pile of broken parts that used to be a person. She is still conscious, still breathing, just completely shattered and lying in her own fluids, while the witches stare at her and decide she's not worth killing yet. They drag her out of the room with meat hooks and store her in the basement with 2 other people who also got broken and kept alive. Olga stays down there for weeks, maybe longer, unable to move except for small twitches. She's in constant pain, begging anyone who passes by to finish her off. At the end of the movie, a demon shows up and grants her request for death, which she's been asking for the entire film. Because even supernatural evil looked at her situation and agreed that it was a bit much. You would not last because pain tolerance doesn't scale. You either pass out or go insane. And Olga didn't get either option. She had to stay awake and feel everything until someone who is evil in their own way finally decided to show her mercy. Let's now move on to a little film where a college film student decides to make a documentary about fear, which sounds fine, a little bit pretentious until you meet his classmate Quaid, who has some pretty specific ideas about what fear actually means and how far you should take a student project. The documentary starts normal enough, just interviewing people about their worst nightmares, childhood trauma, things that keep them up at night, and one student named Cheryl talks about her dad forcing her to visit slaughterhouses when she was little, how it made her terrified of meat, and she became a vegan because of it and hasn't touched meat since. Quaid listens to this, nods along, takes notes, and then later kidnaps Cheryl and locks her in a concrete room with one raw steak and a camera. He tells her the door stays locked until she either eats the meat or dies, whichever comes first, and then he just leaves and waits. This is not quick torture. It's a slow one because Cheryl's in there for days getting hungry while the steak rots and grows maggots and starts to smell like whatever death smells like when it's been sitting under a heat lamp in a locked room. She holds out as long as she can, maybe a week, but eventually your body stops asking permission from your brain and she eats it, gagging the whole time, crying, completely broken. You might be thinking right now, Mr. Chupacabro, it's literally just a steak. She should get over her fear and eat it. Well, I would agree with you, up until Quaid opens the door, says congrats, and tosses in the corpse of another student with a knife. He then tells her to see how hungry she needs to be before she eats that too, then locks her back in. The film doesn't really confirm whether she does it, but it also doesn't need to because we understand the point. Death would have been immediate. This is just endless degradation until your identity doesn't really exist anymore. And you're not gonna last because your brain would choose starvation after day 3. But your body would override the decision and you'd hate yourself either way, and you would probably be broken forever. Could you actually eat a human being if you had to and live with that guilt? I don't know, and I hope nobody has to, but that's kind of the point of the video. Let's now move on to a faster transformation. And instead of being locked in a room until you break, imagine getting physically ruined in one night and then spending the next several years watching yourself turn into the thing that ruined you. Victoria is out on Halloween with friends when they meet Art the Clown, who's just a friendly guy in a mime costume standing on the street. And because horror movies require people to ignore every instinct they have, they don't immediately cross the other side of the road. I mean, they kind of get away from him, but they kind of like fuck around with him first. And that's not the good idea. Don't do that. You see Creepy Clown, do not go and be friends with Creepy Clown. Creepy Clown bad. Art then follows them and then attacks. And by the time Victoria escapes, she's missing an eye and most of her face because Art decided to chew on it before the police showed up. That is just a brief summary of what happens in that movie, but it's really not that important because the broader themes of the video is basically We're talking about Victoria. Anyways, 1 year later, she's on a talk show trying to talk about survival and trauma, which already seems like a bad idea. And in the middle of the interview, she snaps and gouges out the host's eyes on live television while laughing. The trauma didn't just scar her face, it rewired her brain completely. And that sweet college student who existed before that Halloween night is just gone now, replaced by someone who murders people on daytime TV. But it gets worse, because in the sequel, we find out Victoria's in a psychiatric hospital, and something demonic that follows Art around decides to use her body as a host. She then ends up possessed, writing in blood all over the walls, and then she gives birth to Art the Clown's severed living head, which is a sentence I didn't think I'd have to say out loud, but here we are. By the third movie, she's working with Art fully on. They're kind of like a couple now. She does something with a glass shard. We'll just put it that way. Victoria's fate is worse than death because the person she was doesn't even exist anymore. She survived the attack, but everything that made her Victoria died that night anyway. And what's walking around now is just a damaged version that got hijacked by evil. You wouldn't last because the first time you looked in a mirror and didn't recognize yourself, you'd understand that surviving isn't always the same as living. At least Victoria's nightmare though happened in one timeline, because our next case is someone who spent years getting tortured in different ways by the same enemy. Every time she survived, it just got worse. Miss Pierce has the worst luck in horror movie history, and it starts before she's even born because Chucky kills her father and stabs her pregnant mother, which causes Pierce to be born paralyzed from the waist down. Fast forward 25 years, and Chucky tracks her down again, murders her entire family, frames her for it, and she gets sent to a psychiatric hospital for crimes a doll committed, which is already a pretty bad situation. Then it gets layered. Chucky uses voodoo to possess her body, so Pierce is fully aware and trapped inside her own head, while Chucky pilots her around, killing people with her hands. She can't do anything except watch. This goes on for years, just intermittent periods of Chucky taking over and using her body as a murder vehicle while she's screaming internally with no control over her arms or legs or voice. Eventually, Chucky's longtime girlfriend, Tiffany, decides that she wants to keep Pierce around but stop Chucky from possessing her, and her solution to this problem is to drug Pierce and surgically remove all 4 of her limbs while she's unconscious. Pierce wakes up and realizes her arms and legs are gone, and she's completely dependent on Tiffany for everything, and the possession still happens anyway, so the whole thing was pointless, except now she's a quadruple amputee trapped with a serial killer doll and his weird girlfriend. This is years of the most worst horror you can think of. Already paralyzed, then framed, then institutionalized, then possessed, then dismembered, and through all of it, Miss Pierce stays conscious and aware and filled with rage that has nowhere to go because she physically cannot do anything. You, me, we ain't last this because hope is a thing that requires a future, and Pierce's situation makes it pretty clear there isn't gonna be one. At a certain point, your brain just stops trying to fix problems it knows can't be fixed, like my dating life, and being a limbless possession target with no rescue coming is that point. Let's move on though. 3 years is a long time to spend looking for somebody, but that's how long Rex searches for his girlfriend Saskia after she disappears from a gas station in broad daylight with witnesses around and nobody sees anything useful. He plasters missing person posters everywhere, does media interviews, basically makes finding her his entire personality. And then one day, the guy who took her just walks up and introduces himself. His name is Raymond. He's a chemistry teacher with a wife and kids. And he tells Rex he'll explain exactly what happened to Saskia if Rex agrees to experience the same thing she did. This is clearly a bad offer. Raymond's essentially saying, drink this poison and find out if you die. And Rex knows this. You can see him thinking about it, weighing whether satisfying his curiosity is worth whatever is about to happen. And then he drinks the coffee anyway, because 3 years of obsession doesn't lead to good choices. Rex wakes up in complete darkness inside a wooden coffin buried underground. And that's where the movie ends. He's 6 feet under the dirt. No one knows where he is. Raymond's already home with his family acting normal, and Rex gets to spend his final hours understanding exactly what Saskia went through before she suffocated in the same kind of box. The film's last shot is Rex screaming in the coffin while we see a newspaper at Raymond's house listing both of them as missing persons, which means no rescue is coming because no one's even looking in the right country. Being buried alive is a specific kind of nightmare that doesn't really need much explanation. It's dark, you can't move, it probably smells
smells. If you fart in the box, you're going to have that stinking up the place the entire time. The air is running out, and every second your brain is just screaming at you to escape while your hands scrape uselessly at wood. You wouldn't last this because panic uses oxygen faster than calm does, and you'd burn your way through your air supply trying to claw your way out of a box that's surrounded by dirt that weighs more than a car. Smart thinking there, buddy. Ultimately, Rex chose his nightmare because he needed the answers. But sometimes the worst fates are the ones you create trying to do the right thing. But the person you're trying to save is the person you end up destroying, and you have to live with that. A thick mist rolls into town carrying creatures that kill anything they touch. And after being at a grocery store with a bunch of crazy people for a while, David grabs his 8-year-old son and a few survivors and drives through it to find safety. He's listening to people die on the radio. He's watched monsters pull apart anyone who goes outside. But eventually, they run out of gas in the middle of nowhere with things circling the car, and David has to make a calculation. He has 5 people in the vehicle and 4 bullets in the gun, and he decides that dying fast is better than getting torn apart slowly by whatever's in the fog. And normally, he would be right. So he shoots his own son first, point blank, and then the other 3 adults, and he's holding the empty gun when the mist starts to clear and the military rolls through with flamethrowers killing the creatures. The rescue he was waiting for arrives maybe 90 seconds after he murders his own child. David realizes if that he just waited 2 more minutes, everyone in the car would have been fine. The film ends on his face as he screams, surrounded by soldiers and survivors who have no idea what he's just done. That's it. There's no resolution, no forgiveness. Just a man who has to wake up every single day knowing that he killed his son for literally no reason. This is a type of psychological destruction on a level that does not heal. David doesn't get injured. He doesn't get tortured. He doesn't lose a limb. He just has to exist with the knowledge that he made the worst possible choice at the worst possible time, and there is no taking that back. You wouldn't last because guilt like that does not fade. It sits in your chest and grows, and eventually you would realize that surviving was the actual punishment and dying with them would have been the mercy you always wanted. David's hell was mental. He'll be stuck in his own head with a memory he'll never be able to escape. What if the building itself wouldn't let you leave and reality stopped working the way it's supposed to? A reality TV crew decides to film a ghost hunting episode inside an abandoned psychiatric hospital, which is already a decision that shows poor planning, and they lock themselves inside overnight to prove how brave they are. For the first hour, it's just them wandering around with night vision cameras making jokes about spooky noises. Standard ghost show stuff. But then they try to leave and the front door doesn't open to the outside anymore. It opens to another hallway. Every exit they find leads deeper into the building instead of out of it. The hospital's layout starts changing. Hallways stretch longer than they should. Stairwells loop back on themselves. And time stops making sense because their watches say it's morning, but it's still dark outside and their food rots in minutes. They're trapped inside a building that's rewriting physics to keep them there, and the ghosts of former patients and doctors start showing up to make sure they don't get too comfortable. The crew gets picked off one at a time by things that pull them into elevator shafts or stab them in the dark. And the last guy, Lance, spends weeks wandering alone through infinite corridors, eating rats and losing his mind. The footage shows him getting skinnier and more incoherent until he's just babbling at the camera about nothing. And then the hospital's ghost doctor finally finishes the job by lobotomizing him. Lance survives the procedure. He just doesn't survive as Lance. The last scene is him drooling in a wheelchair with dead eyes while spirits walk past him like he's a freaking cactus or a piece of furniture. The horror here is being trapped in a place where doors don't lead to exits, where walking forward just takes you in circles, where the entire ability decides that you're not leaving anytime soon, and then surviving through that for weeks, if not months, all to know that it was just for nothing. You wouldn't last because your brain needs logic to process these escape routes, and once you realize that the rules don't apply anymore, that's when the panic turns into something permanent, and it just sits there vibrating until you're not you anymore. Let's now move on. A field of tall grass should not be scary. It's just plants. But in this case, the grass sits on top of something that warps time and space and traps anyone who walk into it. A woman hears a kid crying for help from inside the field and does the reasonable thing and goes in to find him. And within 5 minutes, she's completely lost because the grass shifts around her and paths stop leading where they should. Her brother follows her in, and then other people hear them calling for help, and they go in too. And now there's 6 people wandering around in circles, getting thirsty and sunburned while the grass plays games with their sense of direction. The real problem shows up when they find a black rock in the center of the field that apparently controls everything, and one guy touches it and goes completely insane. He starts hunting the others through the grass, killing them in different ways, stabbing one, strangling another, and here's where it gets worse than just murder. Every time someone dies, time resets and the loop starts over with another version of them walking into the grass, which means they don't die once and get it over with. They die hundreds of times in a cycle that doesn't end. One character figures out that they've been reliving the same deaths over and over, watching themselves get killed by the same person in the same field. The grass keeps resetting everything. There is no exit, no final death, just an endless repeat where you walk in, get lost, get murdered, and wake up outside the grass ready to do it again without remembering the last loop. The film shows rotting corpses of the same people scattered through the field from different timelines, and the victims have no idea they're looking at themselves. You're stuck in a nightmare where dying doesn't fix anything. It just sends you back to the start, which is not something Aunt Me or you or anybody is going to be able to mentally process and survive. That grass field runs on supernatural rules that we really don't understand. The next movie we're going to talk about runs on physics that we do understand, and somehow that makes it infinitely worse. The year is 2047, and a rescue crew gets sent to investigate a ship called the Event Horizon that disappeared 7 years ago and just reappeared near Neptune with no explanation of where it's been. Captain Miller and his team board the ship expecting to find wreckage or bodies, and what they find instead is a gravity drive that punched a hole through space-time directly into another dimension. That dimension is what most religions would call hell, or as I would call, Georgia. The ship's original crew got pulled into this hell dimension when the drive activated, and the things that happened to them there are shown in brief flashes of recovered footage. Screaming, self-mutilation, people tearing each other apart in ways that suggest that they weren't human anymore by the time it was over. The ship itself came back possessed by whatever exists in that place. It starts attacking Miller's crew, showing them hallucinations of their worst fears, driving them insane one by one. And Miller realizes the only way to save anyone is to physically separate his crew from the gravity drive by blowing the ship in two. He manually sets the explosives, knowing that it'll trap him on the wrong side with the evil core of the ship. The last thing we see is Miller screaming as the drive pulls him backwards through the portal into the hell dimension while his surviving crew escapes. The movie confirms that this is not a metaphor. It's an actual place of infinite chaos and suffering that exists outside our universe, and Miller just got dragged into it for eternity. There's no time limit on his torture, no end date, just endless existence in a dimension designed to break your mind, body, and soul. Film asks, what's worse than death? And the answer it gives is being pulled into literal hell while fully conscious and staying there forever with no hope of escaping or your pain ending.
John Hurt is sitting at dinner, probably thinking about how space food tastes terrible, when suddenly his chest decides to explode. Now, here's what's wild about this whole thing. Kane gets face hugged by this spider thing earlier, right? And then he wakes up and everyone's acting like he just had this really bad hangover. The alien falls off, Kane seems fine, so naturally they all sit down for a nice meal, because nothing says let's celebrate like nearly dying from an alien parasite. Here's where it gets medically horrifying. That thing wasn't just chilling in his chest cavity having a good time. It was growing. And when it decided to make its grand entrance, it literally tore through his sternum, which is basically the hardest bone in your chest. It's not a gentle push from the inside. That's a full-on construction jackhammer going through your ribcage. The pain receptors in your chest wall are everywhere, and I mean everywhere. So when this thing starts breaking ribs and ripping through muscle, Kane felt every single bit of it. Your chest would have more nerve endings than your arm or leg, which means the pain signals going to his brain were basically screaming at maximum volume. What's even worse is that he stayed conscious for the whole thing. You can even see him thrashing around, fully aware that his body just became a horror movie special effect. Medical experts say chest trauma causes this sharp, burning pain that people describe as feeling like they're being stabbed with a hot knife. I would know because I get it randomly throughout the day sometimes.
Why does this happen? I don't know. My doctor says I'm healthy. Except Kane gets to feel that over his entire chest cavity while watching something burst out of him. Here's the really messed up part though. The filmmakers didn't actually tell most of the actors what was actually going to happen. They just said John's going to have some kind of medical emergency during dinner. So when that puppet alien exploded out of the fake chest with actual cow intestines and blood everywhere, everyone's reactions were completely real. Apparently, Veronica Cartwright got hit with so much blood she almost passed out on set. Imagine being her. You show up to work thinking you're filming a dinner scene, and suddenly your coworker's chest explodes and you're covered in what looks like actual human organs. No wonder she almost fainted. The rest of the cast is screaming and jumping back, which is exactly what you would do if your friend suddenly became an alien birthing center. But the worst part about Kane's death isn't even the alien. It's that he probably felt his ribs snapping one by one as this thing clawed its way out. That's not a quick death. That's several seconds of feeling your skeleton getting demolished from the inside. Kane's chest explosion was brutal, but at least it was over fast. Unfortunately, Timothy Young from Saw 3 gets the opposite problem. Way too much time to think about what's happening to him. So Timothy wakes up strapped to this metal contraption that looks like someone took a medieval torture device and gave it some type of twisted update. His arms are spread out, his legs are locked in place, and there's this mechanical collar around his neck. And you just know this isn't gonna end with a nice massage. The whole thing starts slow. The machine begins twisting his right arm, and you can actually hear the bones start to crack. Not a quick snap, a slow grinding sound while Timothy realizes his arm is being rotated way past where arms are supposed to rotate. And then his shoulder just gives up. But here's the thing that makes this so much worse than Kane's situation. Timothy gets to experience every single break individually. The rack isn't in a hurry. It moves to his left arm next. Same process. Slow twist, crack, pop. Now both his arms are destroyed and he still has 2 legs and a neck to go. Medical reality here is pretty grim. When you break a bone, your body floods that area with pain signals. A single broken arm can make grown adults pass out. I would know because I broke my arm jumping off a play structure when I was in grade 2. The play structure was only 4 feet tall. I don't know how this happened, but I'm not lying to you right now. It was embarrassing. Timothy gets to collect the whole broken bones set. Each new break adds to the previous ones. So by the time the machine gets to his legs, his nervous system is basically screaming from 4 different locations. The legs are worse because leg bones are bigger. More force is needed to snap them. More time to feel it happening. The femur is the strongest bone in your body. So when the rack finally cracks it, Timothy probably felt it in his teeth. What really gets me though is that this whole torture session is supposed to teach someone else a lesson. Jeff, the guy who's supposed to save Timothy, is running around trying to find the key while Timothy is getting turned into a human pretzel. Jigsaw's whole thing is appreciate life. But apparently, the way to do that is by slowly destroying someone's skeleton. The sound design in this scene alone is brutal too. Every crack and snap is loud and clear. You hear Timothy's breathing get more panicked with each break. By the time the collar starts turning his head, he's not even screaming anymore, just making these weak little sounds because his body has basically given up. And then his neck goes. Quick snap and it's over, which is honestly a mercy at that point because having every major bone in your body broken while you're awake is pretty much the worst case scenario for human suffering. But at least Timothy's pain ended when his neck snapped, because Josh from Hostel gets the full deluxe package from a guy who probably failed medical school. Josh wakes up tied to a chair in what can only be described as the world's worst dentist office. Except instead of cleaning his teeth, this psycho businessman decides he wants to play doctor with a power drill in Josh's torso. Because apparently nothing screams being rich like drilling holes into a college kid from America. The whole thing starts with this guy casually explaining that he always wanted to be a surgeon, which is great. Nothing could possibly go wrong when someone with 0 medical training gets handed sharp objects and a helpless victim. Well, this is what happens when you let people buy their fantasies on the internet. So he fires up the drill and just starts making holes. Not surgical holes, random holes. Josh is screaming and this maniac is just drilling away like he's hanging up a picture frame, except the wall is a human being who can feel every second of the metal bit tearing through his skin and muscle. But here is where it gets really twisted. After turning Josh into Swiss cheese, the guy pulls out a knife and cuts his Achilles tendon. Oh! I can't even.
It just makes me nauseous.
Remembering this scene because it's so, yeah, he cuts both of them and then he unties Josh and says, "You're free to go." What a comedian this guy is. Josh tries to stand up and immediately face plants because, surprise, you need those tendons to walk. The guy severed the cables that connect his calf muscles to his feet. So Josh is just lying there trying to figure out why his legs don't work anymore, while Mr. Failed Surgeon is probably feeling very pleased with his creativity. The Achilles thing is brilliant in the most horrible way possible, because it's not fatal, but it makes escape impossible. Josh can crawl around on the floor, but he's not going anywhere fast. And every time he tries to move, those cut up tendons are sending pain signals to his leg. Your Achilles tendon is basically a thick rubber band that is under constant tension. When you slice it, it snaps back up onto your calf muscle. That alone is agony. Then you've got all the nerve damage from the actual cut, plus the fact that your foot is now just flopping around doing whatever it wants. I would know because right now as I record this, I currently have a hurt Achilles tendon. I don't know what I did to it, but just putting any weight on it whatsoever is a ton of pain. Josh probably spent those last few minutes thinking about how he could have just stayed home and played video games instead of backpacking through Europe. But no, he has to go see the world. Well, congratulations, Josh. You got to see a basement in Slovakia where some weirdo practiced surgery on you. The throat cut at the end is basically mercy after all he's been through. So at least Josh's killer knew basic anatomy to finally end his suffering, because Nick from Bone Tomahawk discovers that sometimes the most primitive methods are also the most effective. So Nick is part of this rescue mission to save some kidnapped settlers from these cannibal cave people. And Nick gets captured, which means he's about to become the star of the worst cooking show ever filmed. These cannibals decide to start with an appetizer. They scalp him. They just saw off the top of his head with a knife and stuff his own scalp into his mouth, which is probably one of the most insulting ways to die. Not only are they killing you, they're also making you taste your own hair. But that is just the warm-up act, because two of these guys grab Nick's legs and flip him upside down. They then take a bone tomahawk, which is what it sounds like, and start chopping at his groin area. Not a quick chop. They're taking their time. They're really committed to the process, and Nick gets to hang there watching them work. Here's what makes this medically horrifying. They start at the worst possible place. Your groin has a ton of nerve endings, more than most places on your body. If you're asking why, I shouldn't need to tell you that. That area is designed to be super sensitive for obvious reasons. So when they start hacking away down there, Nick's nervous system is basically getting hit with the pain signal that his brain won't even be able to process. Pretty much he's probably gonna go into shock just from a couple hits. Then they just keep going, up through his pelvis, which means breaking through the pubic bone, through his stomach, which means slicing through all of his organs, through his chest, which means cracking through his ribs and sternum. They're essentially turning him into two separate people, and he gets to experience the whole journey. The worst part is that Nick probably stayed conscious for way longer than anyone should. When you're upside down, blood stays in your brain longer, which means he got to feel more of the process than if they'd done it right side up. These primitive cave people accidentally figured out the most painful way to split someone in half. What really gets me is that this whole rescue mission was supposed to save people from the cannibals, but Nick ends up getting the most creative death in the entire movie. The cannibals might live in caves and eat people, but they clearly understand human anatomy better than the businessman from Hostel. By the time they reach his chest, Nick finally stops screaming, which is probably the only mercy in this entire situation. So Nick's suffering finally ends, but our next victim got torn apart by creatures with PhDs in pain, because Rhodes in Day of the Dead learns that being a complete jerk doesn't make you zombie proof. So Captain Rhodes is this military guy who spends the entire movie being absolutely terrible to everyone. He's rude to the scientists, mean to his own soldiers, and genuinely acts like the kind of person who yells at old ladies in the grocery store. The zombies have basically taken over the world, and this guy's biggest concern is making sure everyone knows he's in charge. Well, the zombies break into their underground bunker, and Rhodes tries to make a run for it. Except Bub, this smart zombie who learned how to use guns, shoots him in the stomach, which is already pretty bad. Getting shot hurts, but Rhodes isn't dead yet, just wounded and bleeding. Then he stumbles into a room full of regular zombies who are way less interested in his leadership skills and are way more interested in his internal organs. These zombies grab Rhodes and just start pulling. Not biting, pulling. They get his arms, they get his legs, and they even have this little tug of war situation going on. Except the rope is a human being who's still very much awake and alive for the whole thing. The zombies win. Rhodes gets ripped in half right at the waist. His top half and his bottom half become two separate items. Here's the really messed up part. He's still alive.
still conscious, still talking. He gets to watch zombies pull his intestines out and start eating them while he was still using them. But Rhodes, being the stubborn jerk he is, uses his last moments to yell at the zombies. His final words are, which is probably the most Rhodes thing he could possibly say. Even when getting eaten alive, this guy is still an insecure, overconfident douche. Medical reality here is pretty grim. Getting torn in half means all your major organs are suddenly outside your body where they don't belong. Your stomach, liver, kidneys, they're all just hanging out in the open air while zombies treat them like a buffet. The worst part is that Rhodes feels all of it. Getting disemboweled doesn't kill you instantly. You can stay conscious for a few minutes while you watch your own organs get pulled out, which means Rhodes got to experience the full horror of being turned into zombie lunch while still being aware enough to be annoyed about it. But at least Rhodes got eaten by mindless creatures instead of supernatural ones. Because Olga from Suspiria finds out that interpretive dance can be a lot more dangerous than anyone realized. So Olga is this ballet dancer at a prestigious dance academy that's secretly run by witches, which honestly should have been obvious from the start because dance teachers are already pretty scary without adding supernatural powers. But Olga decides she wants to quit the academy, which is apparently not the kind of place where you just hand in a 2 weeks notice. The witches decide to teach her a lesson using their signature move, making dance deadly. While the main character Susie is upstairs doing this really intensive routine, Olga gets locked in a practice room downstairs where she becomes an unwilling participant in the world's worst dance-along video. Every move Susie makes upstairs, Olga has to copy downstairs, except Olga's version involves her bones breaking. Susie does a dramatic arm sweep. Olga's shoulder dislocates with a loud pop. Susie spins around. Olga's spine twists until her ribs crack. It's basically the most violent game of Simon Says ever made. But here's what makes this worse than all the previous deaths that we've talked about. This isn't quick. The witches are taking their sweet time, making sure Olga experiences every single bone breaking individually. Her left arm snaps, then her right arm, then her legs. It's methodical, professional. These witches have clearly done this before. Olga's trying to fight it, but you can't really argue with supernatural forces. Her body is moving against her will, bending in ways that human bodies absolutely should not bend. Her shin bone breaks so hard it pokes through her skin. Her jaw gets dislocated. One of her eyes starts bulging out because they broke something in her face. The worst part is she stays conscious through it all. Usually when people get this badly injured, shock kicks in and they pass out. But the witches want her awake. They want her to feel every snap and crack. By the end, she's basically a human accordion that someone stepped on. Olga ends up peeing herself and throwing up, which is what happens when your nervous system gets completely overwhelmed. Her body just gives up on all basic functions because they're too busy trying to process pain signals from literally everywhere at once. When the witches finally show up to finish her off, she's still alive, but barely making any noise. Just soft whimpering sounds because even screaming hurts too much. So Olga's supernatural torture was brutal. But our next death uses just plain old physics, because Ashley and Ashlyn from Final Destination 3 prove that even beauty treatments can turn into torture. These two girls decide to skip a memorial service so they can get their tan on before a party, because nothing says honoring the dead like making sure your skin is the right shade of orange. So what do? They head to this tanning salon that clearly hasn't had a safety inspection since the Clinton administration. They climb into these side-by-side tanning beds that look innocent enough. Just some UV bulbs and a timer. What could go wrong? Well, apparently everything, because this is a Final Destination movie. The machines start overheating because some plant falls over and blocks the air vents and something short circuits and I don't know, which is already a bad sign when you're basically lying inside a giant light bulb. At first, the girls don't notice anything wrong. They're just lying there probably thinking about how great they're gonna look at this party. Then the temperature starts climbing and climbing, and then the beds won't open because the lids are stuck. So now Ashley and Ashlyn are trapped inside what's basically become an oven set to crispy. The bulbs are getting hotter and hotter, and they're starting to realize that this isn't normal tanning bed heat. This is my skin is actually frying like a chicken tender at KFC heat. The medical reality of what happens next is pretty horrific.
When your skin gets burned, it goes through stages. First degree burns just hurt and turn red. Second degree burns blister and sting. Third degree burns actually destroy the nerve endings, which sounds good until you realize that means your skin is literally being cooked off your body. Ashley and Ashlyn get to experience all 3 stages in real time. They're screaming and pounding on the glass, but nobody can hear them because the salon is basically empty. They're watching their skin turn red, then blister, then start to char while they're still fully conscious. What the worst part is that they're breathing superheated air, which means their lungs are getting cooked from the inside too. Every breath is gonna feel like swallowing fire. Their airways are swelling shut while their skin is bubbling and peeling off. Then the bulbs start exploding from the heat. So now they've got glass shards raining down on their already burned bodies, because apparently just burning alive wasn't quite enough. But by the time someone finds them, they're basically human jerky. But at least those girls just died from a horrible accident instead of deliberate cruelty, because Sergeant Howie from The Wicker Man gets the full religious experience, whether he wants it or not. So Howie is this really devout Christian cop who comes to this remote Scottish island to investigate a missing girl. The locals are all pagans who worship nature and do weird folk dances, which should have been his first clue to get back on the damn boat. But Howie's determined to find this missing kid because he's a good cop and a good Christian. Famous last words. Turns out the whole missing girl thing was just bait. The islanders needed a virgin sacrifice for their harvest ritual, and apparently Howie fits the bill perfectly, which you might think is pretty funny for a grown man. But let's just say I'm not going to judge him too hard. Moving on, they march him up to this giant wicker man structure that's filled with farm animals and has a nice Howie-sized compartment in the chest. The locals are all singing and dancing around like it's a music festival, except instead of overpriced beer, they're serving up human sacrifice. Once they light the thing on fire, Howie tries to stay strong. He starts reciting Psalms 23 and praying really loudly, probably hoping that God will send down some divine intervention. But God apparently has other plans that day, because the fire just keeps climbing higher. The thing about burning alive is that it's basically every pain receptor in your body going off at once. The fire starts at his feet and works its way up. So Howie gets to feel each part of his body cooking in sequence. First his legs start burning, then his torso, then his arms. And he's outside, so there's no smoke to knock him out. He gets the full experience. His skin blisters and bubbles. His hair is gonna catch fire. The air he's breathing is so hot, it's burning his throat and lungs from the inside. But the worst part is that he can see the islanders the whole time. They're not horrified by what they're doing. They're celebrating, singing songs and clapping while he screams and begs for help. Lord Summerisle is standing there explaining how this is all for the greater good, while Howie's literally on fire. Howie's prayers eventually turn into screams, which turn into silence as the fire finally does its job. The whole Wickerman collapses in a shower of sparks, taking Howie with it. Now, Howie's death was public theater, but our next killer prefers to kill in private. Because in Terrifier 2, Art the Clown turns a teenage girl's bedroom into a big red mess. Allie is just a normal high school girl doing normal high school things on Halloween night, probably scrolling through social media and thinking about whether she has homework due tomorrow and obsessed with other Halloween stuff. Then Art the Clown shows up and decides her evening needs a lot more creativity and a lot more screaming. Now, Art doesn't believe in quick deaths. He's more of a craftsman, someone who takes pride in his work and really wants to explore all the different ways a human body can be modified, and Allie becomes his latest project. He starts with her face, using a scalpel to carve up one of her eyes and split her cheek open, which is already pretty bad. Art's just getting warmed up. Your face has a ton of nerve endings, so that cut is gonna feel exactly as horrible as you'd expect it would. And then Art decides Allie needs a new haircut, except instead of using clippers, he uses a blade to saw off the entire top of her scalp, just peels it right off her skull and leaves her sitting there with her brain case exposed to the air. So now there's blood everywhere, and Allie can probably feel the cool bedroom air on parts of her head that were never meant to experience the weather. But Art's not done just yet. He flips her over and starts removing large sections of skin from her back with a knife, just peeling it off strip by strip like it's beef jerky. Then he grabs her arm and twists it until it comes off at the elbow. The really sick part is what Art does next. He goes to the kitchen and comes back with bleach and salt. Then he pours bleach into all her open wounds and rubs salt into the areas where he removed her skin, which is insane. And then when Allie's mom finally shows up, Allie is somehow still alive, still breathing, still aware of what's happening to her, which means that she has felt every single cut, every single piece of skin being removed, every grain of salt burning into her raw flesh. So yeah, that's pretty bad. Art's bedroom torture session was sickening, but there's still one death that's scientifically and medically worse, and that is from martyrs, because Anna discovers that some religious experiences are just too far. So Anna gets captured by this secret society of rich people who believe that if you torture someone enough, they'll achieve enlightenment and tell you what happens after death, which is probably the most messed up cult thing I've ever heard of. These people have been doing this for the years, systematically torturing victims to try and create a martyr who can glimpse the afterlife. Anna wins this crazy lottery and gets selected for their ultimate experiment. They strap her down and bring in an actual surgeon who proceeds to remove all of her skin, all of it, every single inch except for a little bit on her face that they leave so she can still communicate what she's experiencing. Now here's why this is scientifically the most painful death possible. Your skin is your largest organ if you didn't know, and it contains a ton of pain receptors. Every square inch is packed with nerve endings that are specifically designed to tell your brain when something is wrong. It's supposed to protect you. The surgeon is essentially activating every single pain receptor Anna has all at the same time, but they don't just rip her skin off. That would be too quick. They carefully peel it away section by section with surgical precision. Anna gets to feel every cut, every pull, every inch of skin being separated from her body while she's fully awake and aware of what's happening. The cult members are standing around taking notes when this happens, probably thinking they're conducting some kind of profound spiritual research. Meanwhile, Anna is experiencing pain levels that shouldn't be possible for a human nervous system to process. Her entire body is basically one giant exposed nerve. And when they're finished, Anna is still alive and still conscious, just lying there without skin, looking at these people who think they've done something meaningful. Her muscle tissue and fat are exposed to the air. Every breath probably feels like getting stabbed everywhere at once. The really twisted part is that Anna apparently does achieve some kind of transcendent state near the end. The pain is so intense that her brain basically short circuits and she starts seeing visions or whatever these lunatics were hoping for. But before she gets to that point, she experiences what is essentially the maximum amount of pain the human body can generate. Every pain receptor firing at once.
Starting off, our first fate comes from House of Wax, where Wade discovers that some art projects really should come with a warning label. So Wade's having what you might call a rough vacation. He ends up in this creepy town with a wax museum, which should have been red flag number 1. But Wade's not exactly the cautious type. The local psychopaths decide he'd make a great addition to their collection, not as a visitor, as an exhibit. Flapjack is also a psychopath, and he says it's kind of messed up. If you don't like this video, subscribe. Don't make my dog sad, come on. But here's where things get interesting. They don't just kill Wade and then coat him in wax. No, that would be too simple. Instead, they paralyze him and pour boiling wax all over his body while he's completely awake. Wade gets to feel every drop of that molten wax covering his skin, sealing him inside what's basically a human-shaped candle. But wait, it gets better. Wade doesn't die from this. The wax hardens around him, and now he's stuck inside this shell, completely unable to move. He can't speak, can't gesture, can't even blink properly. He's just there, sitting in a museum, pretending to be a statue while tourists probably walk by and complain about the weird smell. The real kicker comes when his friend finds him. You'd think this is where the story gets better, right? Wrong. His buddy tries to help by peeling off the wax from Wade's face. Seems reasonable, except the wax has basically fused with Wade's skin, so when it comes off, his actual face comes with it. Wade gets to experience someone accidentally removing parts of his head while he's fully conscious and can't even scream about it. Think about this for a second. You're trapped inside your own body, can't move, and the one person trying to save you is accidentally making things worse. Wade's probably thinking, dude, just let me die already. But nope, he still has to sit there and endure his friend peeling him apart like he's a Christmas orange or something. Death would have been quick with maybe a few seconds of pain, then nothing. But Wade gets to be a living decoration, probably for hours, maybe days, just waiting and hoping someone will find him. When they finally do, the rescue attempt turns into accidental torture. Wade basically got turned into the world's most horrifying mannequin, except mannequins don't have to feel their face getting ripped off. Or do they? Do mannequins have feelings? Is me touching the butt of the mannequin bad? Like, am I doing something wrong there? Are they gonna get mad at me for doing shit? But being trapped as living art is nothing compared to eternal suffering. Frank Cotton thought he was pretty smart when he got his hands on that puzzle box in Hellraiser. This guy spent his whole life chasing bigger thrills. Regular stuff wasn't doing it for him anymore. So when Frank finds this weird cube covered in symbols, he figures it's exactly what he needs. Some kind of key to ultimate experiences. And he's right. just not in the way he hoped for. See, Frank solves the puzzle, and suddenly his room fills with chains that have hooks on the end. These chains don't just grab him, they tear him apart. We're talking about getting ripped into pieces while you're still awake for the whole thing. The chains pull him in different directions until there's not much left of Frank except blood on the floor, and yeah, it sucks. But here's the thing, Frank doesn't die. The creatures behind those chains, they call themselves Cenobites, or basically what like 50-year-old married people start doing when their marriage gets stale. Well, they drag what's left of him to their dimension. And their dimension is basically a place where pain and pleasure got mixed up in the worst possible way. Frank gets to spend eternity being their plaything. Yeah, the parallel to 50-year-old couples where the love has died, it's really apparent, which is kind of gross. RIP if you have parents that are 50 or above. Don't think about that. Don't think about that. Now, you might think that's where the story ends. Frank's stuck in hell. Serves him right for messing with weird boxes. But no, Frank actually manages to escape through some gross stuff involving his brother's blood. Frank comes back to our world, and he's not looking great. He's more muscle and bone than skin, but he's back. And does Frank learn his lesson? Does he think, wow, that was awful, I should probably stay away from demon torture? Of course not! Frank tries to get his old life back by stealing bodies and blood from other people. He's basically become a serial killer just to maintain his gross zombie existence. And surprise, surprise, the Cenobites track him down. And they're not happy that their favorite torture victim escaped without asking permission. So they show up, grab Frank with their chains again, and this time he knows exactly what's coming. Frank gets torn apart again, piece by piece, while he's fully aware it's happening. Right before the chains finish him off, Frank looks at the camera and says,
Jesus wept.
which is probably not what Jesus had in mind when he was doing that. But sure, Frank, very dramatic. The worst part isn't even the torture here. It's that Frank will probably get put back together just so the Cenobites can tear him apart again tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that, forever. Frank wanted the ultimate experience. Turns out the ultimate experience is having your worst day on repeat for eternity for some weird twisted guy's kink or something. Honestly, the amount of leather and like makeup they wear, this movie is, I want to look at the director's search history. I know my search history is bad, but what was that guy on? So speaking of things that never end, some fates connect you to others permanently. Which brings us to our next movie, The Human Centipede. Because some people shouldn't really be allowed to have medical degrees or a license to be a film director, if that's a thing, but it should be because we have movies like this. Why have I watched all three of them? Lord knows. Dr. Hyder has what he thinks is a brilliant idea for an experiment. He's going to create a human centipede by sewing 3 people together, mouth to rear end, to make one long digestive system. And somehow, this guy convinced himself this was science and not just being a complete psychopath. Lindsay draws the short straw and gets stuck in the middle position. So she's got someone's ass sewn to her mouth, and her butt is sewn to someone else's mouth. The whole setup is exactly as horrible as it sounds. She can't move independently, she can't speak properly, and has to deal with whatever is happening at both ends of this nightmare. Ugh. The doctor keeps them alive on purpose because that's the whole point of his twisted experiment. Lindsay has to crawl around on her hands and knees, firmly attached to 2 other people, while this maniac takes notes and acts proud of his work. He treats like the 3 of them, I guess the one of them, as if it's a dog. I don't know. But then things get worse, because of course they do. The guy at the front of the centipede ends up dying first, and Lindsay can feel him getting cold and stiff, but she's still sewn to him, and she can't get away from the dead body that's attached to her face. Then the person behind her dies too, so now Lindsay is trapped in the middle of 2 corpses. She's the only one left alive in this horrible chain, but she can't free herself. The stitching is too strong, and she doesn't have all the tools to cut herself loose. And then eventually they pull themselves loose, and it's really gross and graphic, and I can't show it on YouTube, but yeah. It's a gross movie. It's disgusting. One time I talked about this movie on this channel, and I still remember one comment. I said there's nothing worse than being in the middle of the human centipede. Someone had the audacity to say, you know what? I wouldn't mind being in the middle of the human centipede if I had a big goth mommy in front of me. Every single day, I feel pain, and I wonder if our generation is cooked. That comment proves it. Anyways, the doctor thought he was creating life. Instead, he created a situation where being the survivor is the worst possible outcome, because you gotta deal with the trauma of that and goth mommies. But at least Lindsay knew her nightmare was man-made, unlike our next victim. Because science experiments don't always go according to plan. In The Fly, Seth Brundle builds a teleportation machine that actually works, which is pretty impressive for a guy working out of his apartment. He can step into one pod and instantly appear in another pod across the room. Revolutionary stuff. Unfortunately, Seth decides to test it on himself without checking if anything else wandered into the machine first. Turns out, a common housefly was hanging out in there. No big deal, right? Wrong. The computer doesn't know the difference between Seth and the fly, so it decides to merge their DNA together. And Seth thinks the experiment worked perfectly because he comes out the other side feeling amazing. More energy, better reflexes, improved everything. He's basically superhuman now. For about a week, Seth thinks he's upgraded himself. He can do pull-ups like never before, his stamina is through the roof, and he's got the confidence he never had.
Don't you feel elevated?
Seth's convinced he's the future of human evolution. His girlfriend, Veronica, is less excited, especially when she notices weird changes. Seth starts losing his fingernails. Then his teeth fall out. His skin develops these gross bumps and lesions that keep getting worse, and he begins throwing up on his food before eating it, which is exactly as disgusting as it sounds. Seth's body is slowly turning into something that's part human, part insect, and the worst part isn't even the physical changes. Seth stays aware the entire time. He watches himself become a monster and can't do anything to stop it. He names his new form Brundlefly because apparently he still has a sense of humor about the whole thing, but you can see in his eyes that he knows he's losing the battle against the fly DNA. Seth tries to reverse this process by using the machine again. His plan is to merge with Veronica and their unborn baby to dilute the fly genes. Veronica, understandably, is not interested in becoming part of Seth's science experiment. She's already watched the man she loves turn into something unrecognizable. And she's kissed him, and well, he's like a fly, and that's a disturbing thought to think about. Can you imagine making out with a fly? Yeah, have fun with those dreams. By the end, Seth can barely speak. He's this grotesque creature that's more fly than human, and when he looks at Veronica, you can see there's still some of the old Seth in there, trapped inside this nightmare body he can't control. Seth then guides Veronica's hand to point a shotgun at his head. Can't ask her to kill him with words anymore, but he doesn't need to. Even as this monster, Seth still loves her enough to spare her from watching him suffer any longer. Seth got exactly what he wanted, a transformation. It's not the kind he was hoping for, which is pretty heartbreaking because his soulmate and lover ends up blowing his top off like it's a Fortnite. Quick deaths seem merciful compared, but unfortunately quick deaths seem merciful compared to year-long torture sessions. Because in 7, John Doe really commits to his projects. When this serial killer decides someone represents the sin of sloth, he doesn't just kill them and move on. That would be too simple for a guy who thinks murder is performance art. Instead, John Doe finds Victor Allen, a drug dealer who's also, a very bad person who does bad things that involve very young people, if you catch my drift, and YouTube guidelines don't want to ban me. Anyways, he decides Victor needs to experience sloth in the most literal way possible. So John Doe straps Victor to a bed in his own apartment and just leaves him there for an entire year. 365 days of lying in the same spot, unable to move, slowly wasting away while being kept just alive enough to suffer through every single day of it. John Doe sets up an IV drip to keep Victor from dying of dehydration. Not out of kindness, obviously. He wants Victor to last the full year because apparently this psychopath has a very specific timeline for his murders.
It's dated exactly 1 year ago today.
Victor gets to experience every day of his body breaking down while being conscious for most of it. The room fills with air fresheners, dozens of them, because even serial killers don't want to smell a person rotting for 12 months. John Doe is thoughtful that way. He documents the whole process with Polaroid photos, taking pictures of Victor's decline day after day. It's like the most disturbing time-lapse project you'll ever see. Victor's condition gets worse and worse. His skin develops sores that never heal, he loses weight until he's basically a skeleton covered in flesh, and then at some point he chews off his own tongue, probably trying to end things faster, or maybe just from the pain of everything else. When detectives Somerset and Mills finally find Victor, they think he's been dead for months. The guy looks mummified. His body is so deteriorated that seasoned cops start throwing up at the sight of him. Everyone assumes they're looking at a corpse until Victor suddenly gasps for air and scares the hell out of everyone in the room. Victor survived John Doe's year-long experiment, but barely. The doctors say his brain is basically mush from the trauma and malnutrition. He's declared brain dead even though his body is still technically functioning. Victor dies shortly after being found, but only after enduring 365 days of the slowest, most disgusting torture imaginable. Most of John Doe's other victims got killed quickly. The gluttony guy force-fed until his stomach burst, Probably took a couple hours. The greed lawyer bled to death after cutting off his own flesh. So, maybe an hour of suffering. But Victor got an entire year. Every single day was worse than the last, and he was awake for most of it, ending in his mind being the same as a 7-year-old child in 2025, completely brain dead. But at least John Doe had the decency to work alone. Because apparently, if you piss off old ladies and drag me to hell, their customer service complaint is going to be very bad and have eternal consequences for you. Because Christine works at a bank and has to deny an old gypsy woman's request for a mortgage extension. She's just doing her job, following company policy. It's nothing personal. The gypsy woman doesn't see it that way though. She puts a curse on Christine that's supposed to drag her soul to hell in 3 days. Christine probably figured this was just an angry customer being dramatic. Christine spends those 3 days trying everything to break the curse. She visits psychics, performs ritual sacrifices with her pet cat, and even attempts to pass the curse to someone else. By day 3, Christine thinks she's figured it out and successfully transferred the curse to its original owner. Problem solved, crisis averted, time to get back to normal life. So, Christine and her boyfriend head to the train station for a romantic weekend getaway. She's feeling pretty good about herself. Beat the supernatural curse, saved her own soul, and now she gets a nice trip out of town. Christine's probably thinking this whole experience taught her a valuable lesson about customer service and standing up to weird old ladies that try to curse you. Then, Christine checks her pocket and finds the cursed button that's supposed to transfer the curse to whoever has it. Turns out she never actually passed it along. The curse is still active, the 3 days are up, and Christine is standing on a train platform when hell decides to collect its due. The ground underneath the train tracks starts cracking open. Fire shoots up from the cracks and demonic hands burst through the pavement. These aren't like metaphorical hands or special effects hands. They're actual demon hands grabbing Christine's arms and legs, pulling her down towards the flames. Christine tries to fight back, but what's she gonna do against literal demons? She grabs onto the platform edge and looks at her boyfriend with this expression of pure terror. This is the moment she realizes that all of her curse-breaking attempts were useless, and she's about to experience one of the worst fates imaginable. Demonic hand drags Christine down into the fire. Her skin starts burning as she's pulled deeper underground, and Christine is fully conscious during the whole process, feeling the flames and knowing exactly where she's being taken. Her boyfriend can only watch as his girlfriend disappears into a hole in the ground that seals itself up afterwards. Christine thought the curse was just superstition. Turns out the gypsy woman had connections that go way beyond just an angry Yelp review. Christine's last moments are spent burning alive while being dragged to spend eternity in hell, all because she followed bank policy instead of approving a loan extension. By God though, this movie kind of pisses me off because that woman was in a lot of debt. I'm not saying old women in mountains of debt deserve to lose their home. She was in a lot of debt. And then also, like, I don't like this movie. Like, she didn't get dragged to hell until she pulled the button out. It's like the perfect movie moment. I get why they did it, but like, if it was like the real lore of this, it wouldn't happen that way. It wouldn't. The minute no. I don't know. Obviously, I don't want old women to lose their homes in debt. She was in a lot of debt. That was a lot of debt. So yeah, some customers complain to management, which makes you go to hell. But others steal your identity. But when I say identity theft, though, usually think about credit cards, not brain surgery. Because in Get Out, the Armitage family runs a very specialized business. They find young black people, hypnotize them into a mental void called the sunken place, then auction off their bodies to rich white people who want a physical upgrade. Yeah, it's human trafficking. It's bad. It's bad. This is a messed up concept. Chris goes to meet his girlfriend's parents and ends up getting the full treatment. The mother, Missy, hypnotizes him using the sound of a spoon stirring in a teacup. It seems harmless enough until Chris finds himself falling into complete darkness while his body stays behind in the real world. The sunken place is exactly what it sounds like. Chris sinks deeper and deeper into this black void while reality gets smaller and smaller above him, until he's looking at the world through what feels like a tiny TV screen floating in space. He can see what his body is doing, but he can't control any of it. Chris becomes a passenger in his own life. While Chris is stuck in this mental prison, the Armitages hold an auction. Rich white people bid on Chris's body like he's a vintage car like they want to restore or something. Or like another metaphor for something that happened a couple hundred years ago that is incredibly bad and what the entire movie is based on. Duh. The winner gets to have their brain transplanted into Chris's head while Chris's consciousness stays trapped in the sunken place forever. The blind art dealer who wins the auction explains it perfectly. Chris will still be in there, aware of everything happening, but he'll only control a tiny sliver of his own mind. The art dealer gets Chris's eyes and body, while Chris gets to watch his life being lived by someone else. This isn't death. Chris doesn't get the relief of his consciousness ending. Instead, he gets to spend the rest of his natural lifespan as a prisoner inside his own skull, watching a stranger use his hands, walk with his legs, and speak with his voice. Every day for potentially decades, Chris would wake up knowing he exists but can't do anything about it. Other people have already gone through this process. The housekeeper Georgina and the groundskeeper Walter are actually the grandparents' brains inside young bodies. The real Georgina and Walker are still in there somewhere, screaming silently in their own personal sunken places while elderly white people puppet their bodies around. Chris manages to escape before the surgery, but only after experiencing the sunken place firsthand. He knows exactly what fate he almost suffered, being awake but powerless when someone else lives his life and makes his decisions and uses his body for whatever they want. Most horror movie villains kill their victims. The Armitages do something worse. They steal their victims' entire existence while keeping them conscious enough to know what they've lost. At least Chris gets to keep his human form during the ordeal though, because unexpectedly, podcasting comes with some unexpected hazards if you are in Canada and are named Wallace. Yeah, we're talking about Tusk. Wallace travels to Canada to interview weird people for his show. Because if you didn't know it, Canada's full of freaking weird people. I'm Canadian. Any weird person you ever met, they're Canadian. It's just the rules. We're all weird up here. Not nice to each other. Nope, we're just weird. I like to chug maple syrup. We get it. Make your jokes. I've heard them all. Anyways, Wallace finds Howard Howe, an old sailor with stories about being shipwrecked and surviving thanks to a walrus he called Mr. Tusk. It's kind of hinted that he had a romantic relationship with Mr. Tusk, who is a walrus, but yeah. Howard seems harmless enough. He's just another crazy guy with tales to tell. Wallace figures this will make great content for his podcast audience. Howard has different plans. He drugs Wallace's tea and wakes up the next morning to find his leg has been amputated. Howard claims a spider bit Wallace and he had to remove the leg to save his life. Wallace probably suspects that this is nonsense, but he's strapped to a wheelchair and can't exactly argue with the guy holding the medical instruments. Howard explains his real project then. He wants to recreate his relationship with Mr. Tusky by turning Wallace into a walrus. Not a costume or makeup, actual surgery. Howard plans to remove Wallace's other leg, sew his arms to his sides, and then stitch him into a suit made from human skin to create a realistic walrus body. It's exactly as gross as it sounds. Wallace goes through this transformation while conscious for most of it. His legs get cut off, his tongue gets removed so he can't speak, and his arms get sewn to his torso until only his forearms can move. He's basically moving around like this forever, which is kind of messed up. Howard then uses the bones from Wallace's legs to carve makeshift tusks that he shoves into Wallace's face. By the end of the surgery, Wallace looks and moves like a walrus. He has to crawl around on his stomach using his forearms like flippers. He can't speak, he can only make walrus-like noises. Howard treats him like a pet, feeding him fish and expecting him to behave like the animal he now resembles. Wallace kills Howard during their final confrontation, using his new tusks to impale the old man. And you'd think this means Wallace can finally get help and maybe reverse some of the damage. But no, too much has been removed and altered. Wallace's transformation is permanent. The movie then jumps ahead 1 year, and Wallace now lives in a wildlife sanctuary because that's the only place that makes sense for him. His girlfriend and his best friend visit him regularly. During one visit, his girlfriend feeds him a fish and tells him she still loves him.
I love you, Wallace.
Wallace starts crying, tears roll down his walrus face while he makes these heartbroken walrus sounds. Those tears prove that Wallace's human mind is still intact inside this walrus body. He understands what happened to him, remembers who he used to be, and knows he'll never be human again. Wallace has to spend the rest of his life as an actual walrus, fully aware of everything he lost. Which is very messed up concept, but what is even more messed up is the fact that his girlfriend is like loving him still. She's having weird walrus thoughts, just like the ship guy that lost his walrus lover. If there was a sequel, I wouldn't even want to know what would happen. So Wallace's torture was physical, but some suffering transcends the body entirely. Because in Martyrs, religious extremists take their research very seriously. This group of people believes you can learn about the afterlife by torturing women until they break through to some higher state of being. They call these women martyrs, not because they die for their beliefs, but because they witness something beyond death while still alive. It's a very disturbing concept. It's a very good movie, but it is very messed up. Anna gets selected as their latest test subject. They beat her, starve her, and break her down psychologically until she stops fighting back. The group has done this to other women before, but most of them just died or went insane before reaching whatever state these lunatics are looking for. Anna is different though. She survives everything they throw at her and somehow pushes past the point where normal people would give up. The group gets excited because Anna might actually be the martyr they've been looking for all of these years. Then comes the final test. They strap Anna down and flay her. Not partially, but completely. They remove every inch of skin from her body while she's awake and conscious. Anna should die from shock, blood loss, or infection within minutes, but instead, she stays alive and enters some kind of trance state. Anna hangs there, skinless and barely breathing, but her eyes are moving and she seems aware of her surroundings. The group is thrilled because this is exactly what they wanted. Someone who survived their torture and apparently reached enlightenment through suffering. The leader, an old woman called Mademoiselle, comes to speak with Anna. Anna can barely whisper, but she manages to tell Mademoiselle something. We never hear what Anna says, but whatever it is has a massive impact. Mademoiselle then goes back to her followers who are waiting to hear about Anna's vision of the afterlife. They've spent decades torturing women to get this information, but instead of sharing Anna's revelation, Mademoiselle pulls out a gun and shoots herself in the head. Think about that. This woman dedicated her entire life to learning what happens after death. She finally gets the answer straight from someone who's supposedly seen it firsthand, and her first response is pulling a Fortnite gun on herself. What did Anna tell her? Was the afterlife so wonderful that Mademoiselle couldn't wait to get there? Or was it so horrible that death seemed preferable to living with that knowledge? We'll never know because she took that secret with her. So Anna is left hanging there, skinless and silent, having shared the universe's biggest mystery with the one person who refused to pass it along. Whatever Anna saw pales in comparison next to our final nightmare though, because multi-generational planning can really pay off if you're patient enough. In Hereditary, Peter's grandmother spent decades setting up the perfect conditions for demonic possession. She wasn't just a regular evil grandmother, she was the leader of a cult that worships Paimon, one of the 8 kings of hell. Her life's work was getting this demon into a male body from her bloodline, and Peter was always the end goal. Everything that happens to Peter's family follows her plan. His sister Charlie gets possessed first because Paimon needs a temporary host while they work on breaking Peter down emotionally. Charlie then dies in a car accident that wasn't really an accident. The cult made sure she'd be in the right place at the right time to get her head knocked off by a telephone pole. Peter blames himself for Charlie's death because he was driving the car when it happened. His guilt eats him alive while his mother Annie slowly loses her mind from grief. The family starts falling apart exactly the way the cult intended. Annie then discovers her mother was leading this demon worship group, but it's too late to do anything about it. The cult has already positioned people around the family. Joan, who befriends Annie at a grief support group, is actually one of the cult members guiding Annie through fake seances that just make everything worse. Peter watches his father get burned alive when Annie tries to destroy Charlie's sketchbook. Then Annie herself gets possessed and chases Peter through the house while making inhuman sounds and crawling on the ceiling. She cuts off her own head with a piano wire right in front of Peter, who's now completely traumatized and broken. That's when Paimon makes his move. Peter has been emotionally destroyed by watching his entire family die in horrible ways. He's at his absolute lowest point, which is exactly what the cult needed. Paimon can only possess someone who's been worn down enough to be vulnerable. Peter tries to escape by jumping out of the attic window, but even that doesn't work. He crashes to the ground, probably breaking his neck, but Paimon's spirit enters his body and heals the damage. Peter stands up, but he's not Peter anymore. The cult members emerge from hiding and carry Peter's body up to Charlie's treehouse, where they've set up a shrine to Paimon. They place a crown on his head and worship him as their new demon king. Peter's eyes are open and he's breathing, but Peter isn't home anymore. Paimon now has a young, healthy body to inhabit. and Peter's consciousness has been pushed aside or destroyed entirely. Peter gets to be technically alive while a demon uses his face, his voice, and his hands to do whatever it wants for potentially decades. His grandmother's plan worked perfectly. She died happy knowing her grandson would spend the rest of his life as a prisoner in his own body. You're Vera, you're sitting on a dock by the lake, and it's actually pretty nice out. The sun's warm, the water's calm, and you're just existing for a second without anyone bothering you. Then you see someone walking towards you with what looks like a spear gun, and your first thought isn't run, it's confusion, because you think it's your friend messing around. You actually ask, "Who are you?" out loud, like Jason Voorhees is going to introduce himself properly and explain his intentions. Yeah, he doesn't do that. Instead, he lifts the spear gun, aims it directly at your face, and fires. The bolt hits your left eye at full speed. Your eye has more pain receptors than almost anywhere else on your body. So the very first thing you feel is a lightning bolt of pain that shoots straight through your skull and makes every other hurt you've ever felt seem like a joke. But here is the thing, you don't get to feel it for long because the bolt doesn't stop at your eye. It keeps going straight through the socket, through the bone, and into your brain. Your brain is where you process pain. So the second that bolt punches through and starts shredding the tissue that makes you, the pain just stops. Not because it's over, but because the part of you that understands pain doesn't exist anymore. You might stay conscious for 1, maybe 2 seconds, just long enough to register that something's very wrong and you can't see anymore. And then you're just gone. Lights out. Total blackness. The bolt exits the back of your skull and you collapse into the water. And the whole thing from impact to death takes less time than it took you to listen to me say this sentence. They also filmed this in 3D, by the way, because nothing says summer blockbuster fun like a harpoon directly to the face. At least Vera didn't have time to think about it. And honestly, that's the best case scenario when Jason's involved, because most deaths in horror don't happen that fast. Most deaths give you time to understand exactly what's happening to you. And that's when the real horror starts. Because your brain doesn't shut off when you want it to. It keeps processing every awful second until there's nothing left to process. And that's why it sucks when time moves different while you're dying. You're Charlie, you're 13 years old, and you just ate something at a party that your body decided was poison. And now your throat's closing up and you can't breathe right and everything's starting to feel far away and wrong. Your brother Peter's driving you to the hospital and he's going way too fast because he's panicking. You stick your head out of the window because you need air. You need cold air on your face, anything to make your lungs work again. You're already halfway to passing out from lack of oxygen, so you're not really thinking clearly. You're just trying to survive the next 10 seconds. Peter swerves to avoid an animal that's on the road. The car jerks hard to the side, and your head, which is sticking out the window, meets a telephone pole at 70 miles per hour. You don't feel it. The impact is so fast and so violent that your head separates from your body before the pain signals even have time to reach your brain. The thing is, your brain goes with your head, so it's not like you're sitting there processing what just happened. The whole your brain stays conscious for a few seconds after decapitation thing that people always bring up, it's possible in theory, but you were already oxygen deprived, already shutting down. So if there's any awareness left in those last 2 seconds, it's probably just darkness and confusion. Peter drives home. He doesn't call anyone. He doesn't scream. He just drives home and goes to bed and leaves your headless body in the backseat overnight because his coping strategy was to pretend that it didn't happen. This works until morning when your mom finds you. Yeah, Ari Aster really said, let's make this the most emotionally devastating scene possible, and also let's cover the severed head and ants for the daytime reveal. The thing about instant death is that it's almost a kindness. You're there, then you're not. No transition, no suffering, just done. But when death takes minutes, when you're conscious and aware and you can feel your body failing piece by piece, that's when your brain becomes the enemy, because it won't let you check out early no matter how much you want to. It makes you feel every single second until the very end. And who better to represent that than Seth Brundle, who had months to figure out what was happening to him. You're a scientist. You invented a teleportation device that actually works. You're pretty proud of yourself until you realize there was a fly in the pod with you, and now your DNA is mixing with insect DNA and there's no stopping it. The transformation doesn't happen overnight. It's slow. You get to watch yourself fall apart piece by piece, day by day, and you're aware enough the whole time to understand exactly what's being taken from you. Your fingernails fall out first, then your teeth. And trust me, I know what it feels like to have your teeth fall out. I have a condition called Tourette's, and one of my tics is literally grinding my teeth so hard that they break in my own mouth. It's a very painful feeling. It's not fun. But anyways, every time something drops off your body, you feel the exact moment it separates. The little snap of connection breaking, and then the raw bleeding skin underneath that's suddenly exposed to air. Your skin starts splitting, not all at once, but in sections, peeling back to show something underneath that doesn't look human anymore. And the pain of that is constant. It's like being flayed from the inside out, except you can't pass out, you can't die yet because your body's still trying to function, even though it's actively becoming something else. By the end, you're this massive insect thing, barely recognizable. And when your ex-girlfriend Veronica accidentally rips your jaw off during a struggle, your whole face just tears away and reveals what's been growing underneath. You're conscious for all of it. You feel your bones breaking and reforming. You feel your organs shifting. David Cronenberg said he wanted it to feel like terminal illness, like watching your body betray you while you're still trapped inside. And honestly, you just look like the standard guy from Ohio. Let's be honest here. The last thing you do is guide Veronica's shotgun to your own head because you're begging her to end it. And when she finally pulls the trigger, that's mercy. Seth's death took months, but our next character we're going to talk about took about 5 seconds, but he felt every single one of them. And unlike Seth, he didn't get to ask for it to stop. Bob from the City of the Living Dead didn't do anything wrong. If you're Bob, you're just a guy, kind of down on your luck. People in town don't like you because you're poor and you look weird, and that's enough of a reason apparently. And one day this man named Mr. Ross decides you're guilty of something even though you're not. Instead of calling the police, he walks you into a garage and pushes your head against a drill press. You see the bit spinning before it touches you. You hear the motor running and you try to pull away, but he's stronger and he holds you there and turns the machine on. The drill touches the side of your head near your temple, and the first thing you feel is your skin tearing, just ripping apart as the bit grinds into you. And it burns because the friction makes it hot and you can smell your own skin burning. Then it hits your skull. Your skull doesn't want to break. It's bone. It's strong. So for a second, the drill just vibrates against it and you feel that vibration through your entire head. This horrible mechanical buzzing that you can feel in your teeth. And then the bone cracks and you hear it crack. Oh, it's a wet snapping sound that's louder than anything because it's happening inside your skull and the sound is coming from inside you. The bit punches through your brain, and that's when things get weird because your brain doesn't have pain receptors, so the pain just stops, but you're still awake for maybe 1 more second, maybe 2. And in that second, you might see a bright light or hear a loud ringing or feel absolutely nothing at all, and then you're gone. The whole thing from start to finish is about 5 seconds. Lucio Fulci filmed it in close-up with no cutaways, just the drill going in and coming out the other side of Bob's head. The irony is that Mr. Ross didn't even check if he got the right guy, which he didn't. And Bob's last thought was probably just confusion, but why this was happening at all. And that's almost worse than the pain, because at least the pain makes sense, but this didn't make sense. None of it made sense. The thing about drills is that they're tools. They're not supposed to be weapons, but when someone decides to use one as a weapon, they commit to it. They have to hold you there and push and keep the motor running. That takes a specific kind of cruelty that Bob didn't deserve or see coming. Now, unlike 5-second kills, some killers want it to last. You are tied up in a room that smells like mold and bad decisions, or any bar in Canada. And the man who took you is holding a power drill, a long one, the kind that people use for construction. And he's bringing it towards your face very slowly because he wants you to see it coming. He wants you to understand what's about to happen. You can hear the bit spinning in the air, this high whining sound, and you're begging him to stop, but he doesn't stop. He just keeps moving it closer. And the fear you feel in those few seconds before it touches you is almost worse than what comes next. The bit makes contact with the side of your skull and starts grinding through your skin. Your scalp is shredding and you feel this burning sensation mixed with sharp tearing pain. And you can smell the burning because your skin is literally being burned by the friction of the metal spinning against it. Then it hits bone and your skull starts to crack slowly and you feel pressure building inside your head. This massive crushing pressure. And then the bone gives way and the bit goes into your brain. You probably black out pretty fast once it's inside because again, your brain can't process that kind of damage and stay awake. But those seconds before you black out, you're feeling the drill bore deeper. You're hearing the sound of it echoing inside your own skull. You know exactly what's happening to you. There is no confusion, just the clear, horrible knowledge that you're being drilled through the head and there's nothing you can do to stop it. This film was actually banned in multiple countries. People watched it and said, no, this is too much, and they were right. But we're not done with horribly hurting the human body yet, because there's an even worse death out there, and it starts with the story of Achilles. But when captors have all of the time in the world and they want to make sure you can't run, that's when they just start taking pieces of you. Because the people running the facility and martyrs do not rush anything. You're Anna. You've been kidnapped and dragged to this underground torture compound that looks like a hospital designed by someone who failed out of medical school for enjoying the job too much. And your captors have decided that step one is making sure you physically cannot escape. So they walk in with a scalpel, they grab your ankle, and they cut through the back of it in one clean motion. And you feel your Achilles tendon snap. It's this weird pop, almost like a rubber band breaking inside your leg, except the rubber band was the only thing connecting your calf muscle to your heel, and now that connection is just gone. The pain is immediate and it's sharp. It's this burning, slicing sensation across the back of your ankle, and when you try to move your foot, you realize it doesn't work anymore. It just flops around uselessly because there's nothing pulling it up. If you try to stand, your ankle buckles and you go down, and the impact of falling sends another wave of pain up your leg that makes the initial cut just feel like a warm-up. The worst part is the cut itself isn't fatal. You are not going to die from this. You're just going to be immobilized, helpless, and unable to run even if you found an unlocked door. And your captors know that. They filmed it like a medical procedure. It was very matter of fact, very clean, because this is just the beginning of a very, very long process. So they cut both tendons, one after the other. There's one thing I know, it's that French extreme horror does not believe in mercy. It believes in making you watch someone's destruction. And Anna gets to feel every single step because staying conscious is part of the point. She's not supposed to escape into shock. She's supposed to be present. And honestly, I can relate because one time I stubbed my toe and I couldn't walk for a couple of minutes. It hurt pretty bad. The tendon thing is just the first part. The rest of the movie shows much, much more. But I've already talked about the rest of the movie before, and I thought the tendon snap deserved to be talked about for itself. But afterwards, at least she's just lying on the ground for that, not falling through stained glass while actively dying. Because Pat's death is a whole giant production. And I say production specifically because we are going to a ballet studio in Suspira. You're a ballet student. You ran from the dance academy because you saw something wrong, something witchy. And you think you made it to safety at your friend's apartment, but the witches followed you. An arm crashes through the window, grabs you, and starts stabbing. The knife goes in over and over into your chest, into your stomach, and you feel each entry point as this sharp punch followed by deep internal burning as the blade cuts through muscle and possibly into organs. You're trying to fight back, but there's multiple attackers and they're not stopping. They stab you so many times that at one point the knife goes straight into your chest and catches your heart mid-beat. And Dario Argento's camera shows your heart still pumping with a knife in it, which is not something you'd think that you could film in 1977, but here we are. You're bleeding heavily, you're probably going into shock, and then they tie a cord around your neck and hoist you up off the ground. And now you can't breathe on top of everything else. The cord crushes your windpipe, cuts off blood to your brain, and you feel this horrible choking sensation mixed with the burning pain from all of the stab wounds. And your body's trying to cough, but it can't because your throat is closed. Then they push you through a stained glass ceiling. You crash through with the glass shards slicing into you everywhere, and the cord catches on something and you just hang there dying, while your friend below gets impaled by falling glass and also dies. And the whole thing takes maybe a minute from first stab to final breath. Argento filmed this in bright colors with a prog rock soundtrack, and somehow that makes it worse because it's not gritty realism. It is realistically an opera of violence, and Pat's death is an opening number that establishes that these witches don't do anything small. But still, that's conventional violence. Witches with knives and cords, at least you can see what's killing you and it makes sense normally. But when death comes from something that operates outside of normal biology, when your body stops being your body, that's a different kind of nightmare entirely. Because the kennel dogs thought it was just another husky. Wrong. It was the thing. And you are now a dog. You're one of the sled dogs at the Antarctic Research Station. And this new dog that just got brought in seems fine at first. It's quiet, well behaved, just sitting there in the kennel with the rest of you.
And then its head starts opening, not like a mouth opening, but the entire head splits apart into 3 sections with teeth on every surface. And before you can even process what you're looking at, tentacles shoot out from where its organs should be, and one of them wraps around your leg and pulls you towards it. But the thing doesn't kill you, it absorbs you. There is a large difference. Your cells are now being hijacked one by one. Your DNA is being rewritten on the fly, and you can feel your body stop being your body and starting to become part of something else that's using your shape as raw material. If there are chemicals involved, like some kind of digestive enzyme the alien secretes, they burn. Your skin goes hot and starts to soften, and you might feel crushing pressure as tentacles pull you into the mass. But honestly, the worst part is probably the awareness that you're not dying. You're being erased. You are being overwritten. The thing that's taking your place isn't you and never will be. The whole process probably takes less than a minute because you're not conscious anymore. Not because you died, but because the part of you that was you doesn't exist separately from the thing now. John Carpenter filmed this in 1982 using practical effects that still hold up today. If you are a dog lover like I am, this is a hard watch. The only thing that will kill it is fire, eventually, after it screams. But at least the thing was alien. It operates on rules outside human understanding. Whereas the lawnmower that is coming next is just a regular piece of lawn equipment used in the way the manufacturer absolutely did not intend. Because if you didn't know, Peter Jackson made a zombie movie in 1992 where the hero straps a lawnmower to his chest and mows down 30 zombies in 2 minutes. You are about to be one of those zombies. Let's walk through what happens. You're already dead. You're already a shuffling corpse with minimum brain function. You know, like the average TikTok user. And you're at this house party with a bunch of other zombies just doing zombie things. Moaning, shambling around, probably trying to bite someone. And then this guy Lionel shows up. He's got a rotary lawnmower strapped to his chest, the motor's running, and he announces party's over and charges straight into the crowd. The lawnmower blade spins at over 3,000 RPM, and when it hits you, it doesn't cut clean, it shreds. Your arm goes first. It just gets chewed up and spat out in chunks. Then the blade catches your torso and starts grinding through ribs and organs and spine, and everything turns into a spray of red mist and meat that just fountains into the air. The pain would be enormous if you were alive enough to feel pain properly. Every nerve ending firing at once as the blade chews through you. But you're a zombie, so maybe you'll just feel this overwhelming wrongness as your body comes apart in sections. And then your head's gone and you're definitely done. The whole sequence used 5 gallons of fake blood per second at its peak. It is not an exaggeration. That is the actual number I got from the effects team. This scene is chaos. It's carnage. It's every zombie getting mulched in seconds. But at least death came fast and the zombies were already dead, so they probably didn't suffer much. But now we need to talk about something worse. Something that makes all of these other deaths look merciful. Because in society, the poor don't eat the rich. The rich eat the poor. Because we are about to talk about the shunting. You're Blanchard. You got invited to a party at a rich person's mansion. You thought this was a social opportunity, a chance to network maybe. And you're in a room full of wealthy people who just peeled off their skin like wetsuits and revealed that underneath there are these slug-like things that can reshape their bodies at will. And they're reaching for you. Their hands push into your stomach and your chest and your back, not cutting through them, but just pushing in. And your flesh gives away even though there's no wound. And it just accepts them. And you feel this deep, horrible pressure as your insides rearrange to accommodate multiple arms and faces that are coming through you from the inside out. Someone's face pushes out of your torso. Someone else's arm is coming through your leg. And your bones are bending in ways that should break them, but instead they just flex and soften, and your whole body is becoming rubber. And they're all laughing while they do it because to them, this is just feeding. It's entertainment. They're sucking out your nutrients, your fluids, everything that makes your body function. And you can feel yourself being drained. It's this horrible emptying sensation mixed with the violation of having multiple bodies literally fused to yours. You can't tell where you end and they begin anymore. You stay conscious almost to the very end because they want you conscious. That's part of it. Brian Yuzna directed this in 1989 as, big shocker, a metaphor for class warfare. And he did it by having the rich literally consume the poor in a slimy orgy of melting flesh. And a guy named Screaming Mad George built the practical effects, and the whole sequence is so wrong on every level that it barely feels like a movie. It feels like a nightmare someone filmed.
So, you're driving to work. It's a regular day, and then you see it in your rearview mirror. A logging truck 2 cars back, and one of those logs is wobbling. You've got 2 seconds left until it gets you, because the logs come loose and they're tumbling through traffic at highway speed. And you've got maybe 3 seconds total from the first wobble to impact, but again, 2.5 of those seconds are just your brain going, wait, what's happening? While physics handles the rest. If that log hits you directly through your windshield, you're not feeling much of anything. The impact would crush your chest and skull faster than pain signals can travel to your brain. So there's pressure and then nothing, which is actually the best case scenario here, and that's a weird sentence to say out loud. But let's say you're not in the direct path. Let's say you swerve and the car behind you doesn't, and now you're part of a 12 vehicle pileup and you're alive, but your car has been hit from the side and flipped and you're upside down with broken ribs. Each breath would feel like someone's jabbing a knife between your ribs, because that's essentially what's happened. The broken bone is moving around in there, and you can smell gasoline, which is a bad sign. And then you see smoke, which is an even worse sign. The heat starts building and you're trying to get out, but your legs are pinned under the dashboard and the seatbelt won't release. Now you're breathing in smoke, which burns your throat and lungs before the fire even reaches you. And survivors of house fires describe that feeling just like inhaling needles. So that's fun for you. This is why this movie traumatized a generation. Not because it's supernatural, but because it can happen to anybody, anywhere. How many times have you driven down a road and there's been a giant semi in front of you doing horrible things? Well, I know where I live in Ontario of Canada, I see young semi drivers literally texting and taking Snapchat selfies while they are driving on the road. They swerve into my lane all the time. Is this an excuse for me to crash out about road rage? Maybe, but I'm not lying. But at least with the log truck, it's over in seconds, or you're unconscious from smoke before the burning starts. But there are deaths where you are fully aware the entire time, and you have to just sit there and experience what's happening to you. Which brings us to a spaceship in the year 2455, where a guy in a hockey mask is about to teach someone about cryogenics. So, you're a scientist in the year 2455. You've got a PhD, you spent years studying cryogenic preservation, and you're currently examining Jason Voorhees' frozen body, thinking he's completely contained and unable to hurt anyone. And you are incorrect about that in a way that's about to become very obvious. He thaws out, grabs you, and you're kicking and screaming and doing absolutely nothing because he's undead and you are not. And he drags you to the lab table where there's a container of liquid nitrogen just sitting there at negative 320 degrees Fahrenheit. And here's a question, why was that not secured? That is definitely a workplace safety violation. Your face then goes into the nitrogen, and the first thing you feel is burning, which doesn't make sense because it's the coldest substance you've ever touched, but extremely cold burns exactly the same way that extreme heat does. Your nerve endings can't tell the difference at that level. You want to scream, but your mouth is freezing shut. Your lips are crystallizing, and if you try to breathe through your nose, you're flash freezing your nasal passages and airways, which causes immediate damage to tissue that really needs to not be damaged. The surface of your face is freezing solid in about 2 to 3 seconds. Your eyes are developing a layer of ice over them, so now you are blind, and your eyelids are frozen so you can't even blink. And the whole time there's this intense pain that then suddenly goes numb, but you're aware that something is very, very wrong with your face. When he pulls you out, he smashes your face against the counter. You don't feel that part. Your brain gets destroyed faster than your face could register the pain of getting destroyed. But those 3 to 5 seconds before the smash are extremely educational in the school of, yeah, your face fucking hurts. You're blind, you can't scream, you can't move your facial muscles, and there's this cold that feels like it's burning its way through your skull. And your last coherent thought is probably just confusion about why your face has stopped responding to anything you want it to do. This is Jason's most creative kill, which is saying something for a guy who once killed someone with a sleeping bag. The nitrogen death is at least quick once the smash happens. You're not sitting there conscious while your face is destroyed. And worse than that, there are deaths where an entire community is standing around watching you die, which is where we're going next with the torture device built by farmers in 1905. You are Jeremy. You're young, you're innocent, and you've just been falsely accused of murder in a remote island cult because the actual murderer needed a scapegoat, who also happens to be your girlfriend's dad, who, conveniently, he murdered and blamed it on you. And now you're being strapped to a wooden table that's got cranks and metal clamps and a hand-operated drill, and the entire village is gathering around to watch this happen. The device is called the Heathen Stand, which is pretty on the nose, and it's made from farm equipment and ship parts, so it's not like they ordered this thing from Amazon. Amazon. Someone built this by hand, which means someone sat down and designed a can opener for human skulls. The metal clamps tighten around your limbs and head until you can't move at all. You can't even turn your head, and you're watching them position this large drill bit directly above the crown of your skull. And this is 1905, so there's no anesthesia, and they probably wouldn't give it to you anyways. This is kind of a torture thing. You're fully conscious and you're about to stay that way. The drill just starts turning and punctures your scalp, and the pain is immediate and sharp as your scalp has a lot of nerves and blood vessels. Even a small cut there bleeds a lot and it hurts, and this is a drill bit grinding through flesh and into bone. The skull itself doesn't have many pain receptors, but the membrane around the bone does, and so does the lining under the skull. So you're getting white hot pain from those areas until the drill destroys those nerves completely. There's also this horrible crunching sound happening inside your head that only you can hear, which adds a whole layer of panic on top of the pain. And once the drill breaches into your brain tissue, the pain might actually lessen because your brain itself doesn't feel pain. But by that point, catastrophic damage is already done. You're disoriented, your vision is blurring, and you're losing control of your body as the drill bit hits vital areas. And then the clamps start to pry apart and your skull is being split open from the inside. And there is no way to describe what that feels like because nothing in normal human experience comes close. Your vision whites out from the massive pressure inside your skull, and then unconsciousness takes over from trauma and blood loss. And the whole thing probably lasts 30 to 45 seconds of conscious suffering. If you ask the director, he said he wanted this scene to really hurt emotionally. Well, mission fucking accomplished. I'm gonna go need to bleach my eyes now. That was a machine specifically designed for public execution. It was meant to be seen and to send a message. But some deaths aren't about the spectacle. They're just about being quick, and when you're dealing with a franchise that's built around creative murder, being quick means injecting acid directly into someone's body until their organs dissolve, which is what we're talking about next. Chemical dissolution is a different category of suffering entirely, and that's what William Easton is about to discover as he gets strapped to a metal fence with robotic arms positioning dozens of hollow needles against his back and sides. William's an insurance executive who spent his career denying coverage to people who needed it, and now the family of one of those people is watching through glass as they decide whether to forgive him or let this happen, and they chose the second option, which means the needles thrust in all at once and he looks like a pincushion. For a brief second, there's just the needle pain, which is bad but manageable, and then there's the hissing sound and hydrofluoric acid starts pumping directly into his body through those needles. The pain becomes immediate and everywhere. It's not a surface burn, it is spreading inside him. It's a burning that radiates from each injection site and then starts moving through his entire torso because the acid is dissolving his internal organs in real time. His stomach lining is blistering and liquefying, tissue starts turning into black goo, and the acid enters his bloodstream, which causes muscle spasms because hydrofluoric acid binds calcium and your muscles need calcium to function properly. So now he's convulsing and screaming while his insides are being chemically melted. He's coughing up blood as his stomach and throat lining turn into goo, and there's this bitter metallic taste of acid in his mouth. His veins are darkening as the acid moves through them, and his skin is discoloring from the tissue being destroyed underneath. And within maybe 20 to 30 seconds, his lower torso literally bursts open and his partially dissolved organs spill onto the floor. The trap then releases and what's left of him collapses to the floor, mostly of him being full of goo. This is Jigsaw's lesson about healthcare. It is very educational, very on the nose. That was a horrible way to go on the human body. Everything dissolved from the inside by a substance designed to break down organic matter. But there are deaths that don't rely on chemistry or tools or machines, just raw physical strength being applied to your body in ways that shouldn't be possible, all with the grace of yoga. So, you're doing yoga by a lake. It's a peaceful morning. You're in the middle of a stretch and feeling very Zen monk Buddhist mode. And then there's a metal spike punching through your back and exiting out of your stomach, and suddenly all of the Buddhist Zen is gone. This is gonna fuck up your chakras. You look down and there's a massive hook protruding from your midsection with a chain attached to it. And your brain is trying to process this while you're in a trance-like shock because severe trauma does that to a bitch. It makes you feel detached and dreamlike even though you are very much experiencing what the fuck is about to happen to you. The hook gets yanked back out and the barbs rip through your internal organs on the way, tearing everything wider. And before you've finished processing that first trauma, the same hook gets driven into the top of your skull with enough force to crunch through bone. And now you have a chain running through your body from your head to your torso, and you're still somehow conscious. Your perforated lung is now collapsing, your stomach or liver is shredded, and there's this intense visceral pain spreading through your entire abdomen because that area has a lot of nerve endings, and you can feel warm blood flooding your insides, which is a sensation that you are not designed to feel. The killer then grabs the chain and yanks it with inhuman strength, and the tension snaps your neck first, which breaks your spine and causes instant paralysis. And then the momentum drags your head down through your own torso, and your body is being rearranged in ways that defy all anatomy. You don't feel the actual head through body part because you're already dead from that neck snap, but those 10 to 15 seconds before that are a progression of impalement shock, ripping sensation, skull impact, and then a brief flash of horrible pain before everything stops. This is called the yoga kill, and it gives a whole new meaning to Downward Dog. Let's move on from downward dogs to turkeys, because it's Thanksgiving, and you are invited to my party. You are Kathleen. You've been captured by a killer dressed as a pilgrim, and you are currently tied to a metal tray after being basted in butter with herbs sprinkled on your skin and an apple jammed in your mouth. So you know exactly what's about to happen, and there's nothing you can do about it. The industrial oven is already heated to 400 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, and when you get slid inside, the first thing that hits you is this blast of heat that feels like opening a sauna door, except multiplied by 10, and you're not leaving the sauna. Your skin starts prickling immediately, and it's developing a severe burn within seconds. You're sweating profusely as your body tries to cool itself down, but there's nowhere for that heat to go, and breathing the hot air scalds your throat and lungs with each breath. The apple gag forces you to breathe through your nose, which means that you're inhaling searing air that scorches your nasal passages, and you can't scream properly, which somehow makes the panic worse because you can't even fully vocalize what's happening to you. Your body temperature is skyrocketing. The heat is penetrating from external to internal, and you can feel your insides getting hot, and your nerve endings are firing continuously with this burning sensation that doesn't stop. Within a couple of minutes, your skin is blistering, and when those blisters pop, it exposes raw nerve endings to the heat, which creates sharp, stinging pain on top of the existing burning. And the killer opens a small port in the oven to baste you with more butter, which feels like boiling oil being poured on burns. Your hair is singeing, and you can smell it burning. Your eyes are drying out, and you're probably getting dizzy and confused as heat stroke sets in and your brain starts to malfunction from your core temperature rising. You likely lose consciousness somewhere between 5 to 10 minutes from heat stroke or lack of oxygen, and those minutes are very long and suck very much for you. But hey, at least you didn't get stuffed like a turkey. Now, being roasted alive is external heat destroying you from the outside in, but there's something worse than that, and that's when the environment itself becomes organic and you realize that you haven't walked into a tunnel, but that you've crawled into an ancient god's digestive system, and it's already starting to eat you alive, which is why we're heading to the church next, deep down under an ancient church where a god lives. And this is exactly what happens when 3 Vatican investigators crawl into the catacombs under an old church, and the walls start getting fleshy. They're chasing what they think is a possessed person deeper into these tunnels, and the stone is gradually turning into warm, wet, organic material. And by the time they notice the skeletons scattered around and realize they're inside something's digestive tract, it's already too late to back out. The passage contracts, and they're being squeezed like food moving through an esophagus, which is exactly what's happening because they've literally been swallowed alive underground. And the tunnel is so narrow that they can barely move their arms and definitely can't turn around. There's slimy fluid coating the walls that starts as a sting on their skin and within seconds becomes searing pain because it's digestive enzymes breaking down their tissue. And their skin is blistering and melting off while the tunnel muscles are crushing inward and cracking their ribs. They're gasping for air, but there's barely any oxygen, and what they're breathing tastes like blood and acid, and it's burning their throat and lungs with each breath. The worst part here is the mental component, and it's that they crawled in voluntarily. They chose to enter this thing, and now they're experiencing what it's like to be my 10-piece chicken McNugget meal from McDonald's. The panic is extreme enough that they might disassociate as a defense mechanism, but if they don't, every second is going to be filled with the knowledge that they're being digested alive and that there's no exit. Within 1 to 2 minutes, they would likely lose consciousness from shock or suffocation, and if not, the continued acid exposure would shut down their systems pretty quick. Not a fun way to go, if you have to ask me. But an even more not fun way to go is from Terrifier 2. That would be Allie's bedroom scene. This scene goes on for so long that you start to think it should be over, and then it just keeps going, and then it just keeps going, and then it just adds salt to the wound. Literally, Art the Clown adds salt to her wounds. And that's the actual horror of it, just the duration of how long this goes on. Allie's at home when Art the Clown breaks in and starts with scissors slicing her face vertically from scalp to cheek. And then he's scalping the top of her head and tearing the entire thing off with hair still attached. And her skull is exposed and she's shrieking, but he's not done. Not even close. He throws her face down and flays a strip of skin off her back wide enough that you can see her spine, and she's still conscious somehow. He tears the entire arm off like it's a chicken drumstick, and blood is spraying everywhere, and she's making these faint sounds that barely sound human anymore. He then grabs her other hand and slices it in half lengthwise between the fingers all the way down to the forearm, splitting it like a wishbone. And then he slashes her torso 6 times and leaves. And you think that's the end, but she's still alive and she's crawling across the floor with one arm gone and the other hand split trying to reach her phone. Art comes back with bleach and salt and douses her entire body in bleach, which soaks into every open wound and causes a completely new level of chemical burn on raw tissue. And then he pours salt all over her and rubs it into the wounds. And her screaming at this point is just turned into these hoarse, guttural sounds of pain. As a final touch, he rips off the left half of her face from chin to ear, and when her mother finds her, she can only whisper "Mom" before she dies. Most people would pass out from shock early on, but the film says you don't. That's just a choice the director made. Let's move on now to the substance. Elizabeth took a substance that was supposed to give her youth, and instead it's giving her a front row seat to watching her own body fall apart piece by piece. And the film shows this from inside her body, which means you're experiencing this happen from the perspective of all of that tissue that's failing. Her teeth start falling out, some just drop with minimal pain because the nerves died quickly, but others crack and break, and each one is a jolt of pain in the gum and jaw. And you multiply that by however many teeth she loses, and her mouth becomes some horror of raw bleeding sockets that sting every time the air touches them. Her eye builds up in pressure and then pops and deflates, and her vision in that eye goes black. And before it goes, she's seeing visual distortions and bright flashes as everything fails. And then her skin starts tearing, and her abdominal skin rips open, and she can feel her inside sliding outside, which is not a sensation humans are designed to experience. Her jawbone then dislocates, and then the lower half of her face just droops because the ligaments are dissolving. And then there's this burning pain throughout her entire body as her organs are liquefying, and she might cough up blood as internal tissues later. Just before the end, she's experiencing intense pressure everywhere, a feeling of being bloated in every part of her body. And that's when the pressure releases in the worst way possible, when she literally explodes and splatters across a live studio audience. This is gross. This is horrible, and it would not feel fun to be exploded.
Last night, I woke up to my arm completely numb from sleeping on it wrong. For just a second, I panicked thinking something was seriously wrong. But that moment of fear got me thinking, what if your body really did betray you? The human centipede isn't just disturbing because of its premise, though trust me, that is bad enough. What makes it truly terrifying is the methodical medical approach to dehumanization. Dr. Hyder isn't some masked slasher. He's a surgeon, someone society trusts to heal people. But instead of healing, he uses his skills to create something that strips away every shred of human dignity. Imagine being conscious, aware, but completely unable to speak or move independently. You're not just trapped in your body, you're trapped in a mockery of what a body should be. I guess you could say it really gives a new meaning to following someone's lead. What makes this worse than death isn't just the physical horror, it's the psychological torture of becoming a literal segment in someone else's twisted vision. Your identity, gone. Your autonomy, destroyed. Your humanity, surgically removed. But if forced surgical modification makes your skin crawl, our next entry might make you never want to record a podcast again. Trust me, what happens to this guy makes the human centipede look like a children's story. Kevin Smith is known for comedy, but with Tusk, he created something that haunts viewers long after the credits roll. The transformation of Wallace into a walrus isn't just body horror, it's identity horror. Think about it. You're not just being physically changed, you're being systematically broken down and rebuilt into something that isn't even human anymore. Your mind stays intact while your body becomes a prison of flesh and surgical modifications. At least with death, you get to die as yourself. But Wallace, he has to live as something else entirely. Something that can't even scream properly anymore. Can you you imagine being so terrified that you want to scream, you're trying to scream, and just nothing comes out? You know, for being a walrus, I guess you could really say this kind of puts the pod in podcast. I hope I don't become a walrus one day. The true horror isn't just the physical transformation. It's the methodical way Howard Howe breaks down Wallace's humanity. He doesn't just want to change his body. He wants to erase who Wallace is completely. But if you thought those transformations were bad, our next entry takes body modification to an entirely new level of psychological torture. The Skin I Live In isn't just about changing someone's body. It's about completely erasing their identity while keeping them conscious for every painful moment. Imagine waking up one day to find your entire body has been rewritten. Not just surgically altered, but fundamentally changed at its core. Every time you look in the mirror, you see a stranger. But the worst part, you remember exactly who you used to be. Dr. Ledgard doesn't just want to change his victim's appearance. He wants to trap them in a living prison of flesh. A prison they have to live in, breathe in, and exist in forever. What makes this fate worse than death is the perpetual nature of this torture. Death has an ending. This is the beginning of an endless nightmare. Every morning you wake up to a body that isn't yours, in a life that isn't yours, with no escape except a mind that won't let you forget who you really are. You are literally forced to be this man's dead wife. If you think surgical modification is the way to lose your humanity, our next movie might change your mind, because sometimes the most terrifying transformations are the ones that happen slowly, right in front of our eyes. The Fly isn't just body horror. It's a masterclass in watching someone lose their humanity piece by piece. Seth Brundle's transformation isn't instant. It's slow, methodical, and worst of all, he's aware of every single change. In fact, he's almost excited about every single change. Imagine watching parts of your body just fall off, but instead of dying, something new and horrifying grows back. But your mind stays sharp enough to document every grotesque detail of your transformation, but you're powerless to stop it. What makes Brundlefly's fate worse than death is the lucidity. He's not just turning into a monster, he's documenting his own descent into monstrosity. He's writing his own horror story while living it. And you know, I guess you could say he got really caught in his own experimental web. I just need to stop doing comedy. The true horror isn't just the physical transformation. It's watching someone's humanity slowly dissolve while their mind remains intact enough to understand exactly what they're losing. Every human trait that disappears is replaced by something alien, something insectoid, something other, something that's different than a human. But if watching your body slowly transform into an insect sounds bad, wait and see what happens when the upper class decides to have a dinner party. Society takes body horror and turns it into something, well, let's just say you'll never look at a country club the same way again. Imagine discovering that the elite aren't just metaphorically feeding off the lower class, they're literally melting into a writhing mass of flesh to consume poor people, and you're invited to the dinner as the main course. What makes this fate worse than death isn't just the physical horror of being absorbed into a flesh orgy, it's the complete loss of individuality while remaining conscious enough to experience every moment of your consumption. The true nightmare of society is that it takes our fear about class exploitation and makes them visceral, disgustingly real. You're not just being consumed, you're being absorbed into a system that sees you as nothing more than fuel for their twisted pleasure. But you know, if you thought human-caused mutations were bad, wait till you see what happens when something completely alien and unable to be comprehended decides to redecorate your cells. The Color Out of Space shows us that just like that college girl that won't shut up about her horoscope, the universe itself can be your worst enemy. Imagine your entire reality being warped by something that doesn't even understand what human suffering is. The color doesn't hate you. It doesn't even know what you are. You're just an ant under a cosmic magnifying glass. The victims of it don't just transform, they merge. Family members fuse together into screaming masses of flesh and color. The land itself becomes alive with impossible mutations. And the worst part, there's no malice, there's no purpose, just the indifferent reshaping of reality itself. And if you thought your family bonding time was bad, just imagine being melted into your brother and sister. Yeah, good luck with that. What makes this fate worse than death is the complete loss of not just humanity, but reality itself. Your mind breaks trying to comprehend what's happening to you, but stays just sane enough to know that everything you are is being rewritten by something that doesn't even notice your screams. But if cosmic mutation sounds bad, wait to see what happens when your own cells decide to throw rebellion against your body. Our next category of fates deals with decay disease. And trust me, these aren't the kind of symptoms you can cure with chicken soup. You know how WebMD makes every symptom sound like you're dying? Well, Contracted takes that fear and turns it up to 11. Because sometimes, dying isn't the worst part. It's the way you decay while you're still alive. Imagine watching your body literally rot away in real time. Your teeth falling out during dinner, your eyes clouding over while you're looking in the mirror, and the cherry on top of this decomposing sundae, you're fully aware and can feel every single moment. What makes this worse than death isn't just the physical deterioration. It's the social isolation of going through this. You're basically experiencing your own funeral while you're still breathing. Every horrified look, every person backing away, every mirror becoming your worst enemy. But you know, if you thought regular decay was bad, wait and see what happens when a parasite decides to renovate your entire body without consulting you first. Because Splinter shows us that sometimes your body doesn't just betray you, it becomes a weapon against everyone and everything you love. Picture this: your bones start breaking themselves, reforming into impossible angles. Your joints twist backwards, and the whole time, you're not just aware, you're feeling every single crack and snap. The real horror isn't just the pain, it's watching your body become a puppet for something else that has malicious intentions. Something that's using your own flesh and bones to hunt down the people that you care and love. And you think you probably have bad joint problems. Imagine being forced to use your joints as weapons. But if being a parasite puppet sounds rough, our next entry might make you never want to visit a morgue. Not that you're planning to, but still. The autopsy of Jane Doe shows us that sometimes death isn't the end of suffering. Sometimes it's just the beginning. Imagine being trapped in your own corpse, conscious, aware, feeling every cut, every probe, every examination. But you can't move, can't scream, and you can't even blink. You're literally trapped in a dead body that won't let you die. What makes this fate worse than death is that it is death, but with a twisted catch. You get all the horror of being a corpse with none of the peace that's supposed to come with it. It's like being buried alive, except you're dead, but you're alive. The true horror isn't just the physical imprisonment, it's the internal nature of the torment. Centuries of awareness, centuries of feeling every violation of your corpse, centuries of being studied and cut open again and again. But if eternal corpse consciousness sounds bad, wait and see what happens when someone decides to keep you alive specifically to torture you, because our next section deals with deliberate torture. And trust me, these are not your typical horror movie kills. You know how they say love hurts? Well, Addition takes that saying and turns it into something that'll make you never want to date again. Because sometimes the most terrifying monsters aren't the ones hiding under your bed, they're the ones that you're going out on a date with. What makes this fate particularly nasty isn't just the physical torture, it's a psychological buildup. Imagine falling in love with someone only to discover they've been auditioning for the role of your personal torturer. Acupuncture needles, piano wire, these are just tools of torture. They're instruments in Asami's weird band class of suffering, and she makes sure you stay conscious for every single annoying note. What makes this worse than death is the intimacy of it all. This isn't just some random killer. This is someone who got to know you, understood your vulnerabilities, and is using that knowledge to craft a personalized nightmare. Death would be merciful, but mercy isn't in Asami's vocabulary. The true horror lies in the methodical nature of the torture. Each cut, each needle, each wire, all precisely placed to cause maximum pain while keeping you alive. Because death isn't the goal here. Suffering is. So what have we learned about body horror? Well, for one thing, maybe being ghosted on dating apps isn't so bad after all, because it could end a lot worse. But seriously, these films tap into our deepest fears about identity, consciousness, and the fragility of our existence. They remind us that sometimes the scariest monsters aren't the ones that are trying to kill you, they're the ones that keep you alive to experience something far worse. And maybe that's why we're so fascinated by them. In a world where we're constantly trying to preserve our humanity, and in film where we're constantly met with death, these stories show us how quickly all of that can be stripped away. If you managed to make through with this list without losing your appetite or puking, congratulations. Drop down in the comments what your favorite body horror movie is, and like the video and subscribe, and then check out this video on screen right now, because these are a ton of horror movies that you have zero chance surviving against. You'll love this video.